Some of the most disturbing events in history were recorded on tape, and then the tapes disappeared, erased, destroyed, locked away forever. Not because nothing happened, but because what did happen was too disturbing to ever be seen. Today, we're covering the cases where missing footage changed everything. A preschool investigation that spiraled into mass hysteria, a live stream watched by hundreds that ended in death, a movie scene that went wrong and was buried, and a legendary stage performance whose final moments were never released. If you enjoy videos like these, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into some horrifying lost media. The McMartin Preschool Trial. August 1983, Manhattan Beach, California. A small, simple building with a rudimentary playground, intimate classrooms, and a little sign hung up at the entrance painted in old Western lettering, which read, McMartin Preschool. It was founded by Virginia McMartin, and together with her daughter, Peggy, and grandson, Ray Bucky, they ran the daycare without incident for 28 years. Nothing exciting had ever happened. Until 1983, when one accusation turned the school's reputation on its head. According to a woman named Judy Johnson, whose son attended daycare at McMartin, he had begun to experience painful bowel movements, and she believed her son was being harmed at school by his teacher, Ray Bucky. But the fear didn't come out of nowhere. You see, this was in the heat of the satanic panic, a worldwide phenomena where people believed that Satanists were endangering their communities. And Judy Johnson believed her son was exploited by Ray Bucky for his own sick satanic pleasures. She would make several more accusations, including daycare workers having inappropriate contact with animals, and claiming that Ray flew in the air, which of course is insane, but the public didn't seem to think so, and neither did the police. The investigation began immediately. Ray Buckley was interviewed and questioned for hours, but at the end of the day, there was no proof, no medical records, no history of abuse. The only adult witnesses would have been his family, who surely would lie on his behalf, so the only witnesses left were the children. On September 8, 1983, just one day after Ray Bucky's arrest, the Manhattan Beach Police Department sent out a bulletin to over 200 parents of students, former and current, that read, Dear parent, this department is conducting a criminal investigation. Ray Bucky, an employee of Virginia McMartin's preschool, was arrested September 7, 1983 by this department. The following procedure is obviously an unpleasant one, but to protect the rights of your children, as well as the rights of the accused, this inquiry is necessary for a complete investigation. Records indicate that your child has been or is currently a student at the preschool. We are asking your assistance in this continuing investigation. Please question your child to see if he or she has been a witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim. Our investigation indicates that possible criminal acts include, and I have to change this because it was pretty graphic, but basically touching the students in their no-no square under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Pretty disturbing stuff. Also, photos may have been taken of your student in their no-no area as well. Any information from your child regarding having ever observed Ray Bucky to leave a classroom alone with a child during any nap period, or if they have ever observed Ray Bucky tying someone up, is important. Please complete the enclosed information form and return it to this department in the enclosed stamped return envelope as soon as possible. We will contact you if circumstances dictate same. We ask you to please keep this investigation strictly confidential because of the nature of the charges and the highly emotional effect it could have on your community. Please do not discuss this investigation with anyone outside your immediate family. Do not contact or discuss the investigation with Raymond Bucky. any member of the accused defendant's family, or employees connected with the McMartin preschool. There is no evidence to indicate that the management of Virginia McMartin's preschool had any knowledge of this situation, and no detrimental information concerning the operation of the school has been discovered during this investigation. Also, no other employee in the school is under investigation for any criminal act. That little annotation at the end is completely correct. There was no evidence, no indication that any crime had been committed from either Ray or the faculty. It was a he said, she said case from the start. But the actions of the police department make it abundantly clear. They weren't looking to exonerate him. They weren't even looking to investigate him. In their minds, he was already guilty. The organization that hosted the interviews that interviewed the kids was called Children's Institute International, an LA-based abuse therapy clinic run by American social worker Key McFarlane. And what they did was an affront to medical science. In the hunt for the supposed crime, they created the crime. In the heat of the satanic panic, normal, everyday people were more susceptible to fear. They believed something was happening, and they needed proof, no matter the cost. The people interviewing the kids ended up asking them suggestive questions, or leading questions. These are questions that not only justify the interviewer's own bias, but these kind of statements skew the perspective of the interviewee. For instance, instead of asking, "What happened at school?" they'd ask, "He violated you, didn't he?" Not much room for interpretation. Not much room for alternative facts or new perspectives. That's a yes or no. And if someone said no, they'd reword that same question over and over in 100 different ways until the answer was yes. And once they got that yes, it was a wrap.
Raymond Bucky, his sister Peggy Ann, their mother Peggy McMartin Bucky, grandmother Virginia McMartin, and 3 teachers were all charged with raising 18 children at the McMartin preschool.
By the end of the interviews, 360 children were apparent witnesses to the crimes of Ray Bucky. And according to them, he did more than kill a horse. The children had also seen witches flying in the air. They'd traveled by hot air balloon on occasion, were taken deep underground through a network of tunnels beneath the school, taken to parties at airports and car washes, and one even claimed to have entered a secret room by being flushed down a toilet. And I am seriously not making any of this up. This was the bulk of the accusations. That is, of course, excluding the physical aspects of the crimes. 360 children, 360 testimonies, physical injury, exploitation, warped supernatural stories. Most of those interviewed were photographed without their clothes, not by doctors, but by a quote-unquote medical examiner who identified tiny scars or pieces of skin that supposedly indicated systemic abuse. And all of these interviews were taped. Every single one. Days worth of footage. Lie after lie. They recorded each child, hypnotized into lying about a single man, interrogated for hours on end, regurgitating the ludicrous imaginary scenes, fed to them by a scared community of unqualified, irresponsible idiots. And during this period, Ray Bucky was still in jail, where he would remain for another 5 years while the lies piled up. Day after day, more evidence would come forward. Another child, another story, another evidence of his monstrosity, and he would have to wait longer, rotting in a cell while the investigators hammered in nails. And there's more. During the pretrial, Judy Johnson, who made the original accusation, was hospitalized for acute paranoid schizophrenia. All of the testimony she made, all of the accusations that started this snowball of chaos, fear, and consequences were made by a mentally ill woman. And to me, that's incredibly sad. Not only was Ray Buckey falsely imprisoned because of these claims, but if officials cared enough to question her a little more, they would have realized she was ill. And she might have gotten help, but she didn't. And in 1986, before the preliminary hearing concluded, Judy Johnson died of chronic alcoholism. The preliminary hearing lasted 20 months, and in the end, Ray Buckey was acquitted on all charges.
Stand trial.
As to counts 3,
On January 18,
count 8,
1990,
count 9, count 12,
after 124 witnesses,
count 14,
1,000 pieces of evidence,
count 56, count 57,
and $15 million of taxpayers' money,
59,
the longest and most expensive criminal trial in U.S. history came to an end.
we, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the very defendant not guilty.
The case lasted 7 years and cost 15 million taxpayer dollars. But we aren't here to talk about how ridiculous this case is. You can see that for yourself. No, we're here to talk about the tapes. And although the tapes no longer exist, I found a transcript from the McCarthy trial and a Dr. Michael Maloney testifying on his experience watching 40 of the tapes. Here are a couple of quotes from the transcript, edited for decency. In almost all cases, the interview started with drawing a picture that was typically outlined by the interviewer. After that, there was a procedure where they went into naming body parts, the specific focus being on the private parts. There was then an introduction of so-called anatomically correct dolls, with the focus again on the private parts of the dolls. There was an introduction of pictures of students and teachers from the school, where persons were identified by the examiner and by the child, with specific focus on certain teachers in the school, and sometimes the child himself. There was an introduction of puppets as a method of presenting information. There was an introduction of the nature of these dolls, that they were dolls that you could not find in a store. There was an introduction of variously referred to yucky, sneaky, and tricky games. There was an introduction of Ray Buckey being a bad person, surveilled by police. There was an introduction of bodily functions in terms of Ray Buckey, and what that might look like, and so forth. Those items were in almost every case here and in many others as well. The defense asked the doctor about reinforcement. How was it done? And the doctor says this: if a child were to have identified a private part of the drawing, the dolls were then introduced, and the interviewer say, "What was this part again?" If they answered correctly, the reply would be, "Great, you're smart. You're really a smart kid." That's the reinforcement, as well as this. There is an implication, if not a statement, that there is something wrong. At this point, from the children, we don't know if there's anything wrong or not, but saying, "These dolls help us figure out some of these things," presents the idea that there is something that needs to be figured out. So that's a strange setting behavior as well. There's ground laid out, we're going to have to work on something here. In some of the tapes, there's something much more specific, saying that negative things happened. There are words like yucky used very frequently in these statements. We're using the dolls as an intermediary. The dolls will help us figure it out. This is where you could really get into the risk of a fantasy problem. You are removing responsibility from the child. You're not saying to that child, "I want you to tell me what you know." You're saying, "We can use the dolls. They'll help us." The McCarthy preschool trial is one of the most horrifying American witch hunts in our modern day. The fear of Satanism put an innocent man in jail for 5 years, with no recourse for the lies told against him. In my opinion, everyone was a victim in this case. Not just Ray Buckey, but 360 innocent children, subject to intense interrogation, in whose very minds were warped and molded into engines of fantasy. What should they think as they grow up? What's real? What isn't? The feelings of guilt, shame, and confusion must have been so immense for these students. And although the tapes have been destroyed, we can only imagine what kind of damage they dealt on their unwitting participants. Abraham Biggs. On November 19th, 2008, a 19-year-old boy named Abraham Biggs opened his computer and made a post on a forum he visited every day. The title read, "Ask a guy who is going to OD tonight anything." Inside the thread, Abraham listed the drugs he planned to take, wrote a brief note about what he was dealing with, and shared a link to a Justin livestream, an early internet streaming site. He wasn't joking. He was inviting people to watch. As the minutes ticked on, more and more people joined Abraham's live stream. These were the people he considered family. "I know it's kind of sad," Biggs wrote. He felt he couldn't talk about his troubles offline. He didn't want to bother anyone, but he felt comfortable talking with the family he'd made on bodybuilding. In fact, he had posted about wanting to end things a couple times on the site, and today he was going to commit. Before long, hundreds of people were watching the live stream. Abraham had a laundry list of medications in front of him, but he hadn't taken any yet. He was waiting to talk it through, and as his family from Bodybuilder joined the stream, they encouraged him to do it, laughed at him, coaxed him on. Those people who actually wanted him to live didn't know what to do, where he was, or who to call. And while the small few worked to save his life, the rest were content with watching. Like a man on the ledge and the crowd below, these people wanted him to jump. A poor, sad boy who needed help in the comfort of his community, encouraged to end it all. Abraham swallowed a handful of medications. He laid down for his final rest and never woke up. Eventually, a site moderator managed to contact emergency services, but when they arrived at the residence, Abraham Biggs was already gone. According to investigators, the chat was still live with a little less than 200 people, and most were expressing their shock or their amusement. They turned off the camera as the chat log rolled on. OMG, LOL. It had been 12 hours since his initial post. Now, I just want to say, this story completely broke my heart. It was unnecessary, completely preventable, and the fact people were sitting around encouraging him to do it is disgusting. Beyond disgusting. The people who encouraged him are monsters and cowards, plain and simple. A 19-year-old boy needed help, and the people he called family pushed him over the edge. And I'd like to say I can't believe people would act like this, but I can. The internet is a hole sometimes, and it's the sad truth. I'm not surprised. His father was of a similar mindset. As a human being, you don't watch someone in trouble and sit back and just watch. Now, on Justin, the live streaming site he was live streaming on, all of the live streams were recorded. They had an automatic archiving feature that would save live streams as videos, and Abraham's video was saved. We don't know how long the footage was up, but it was later removed by Justin after heavy backlash and destroyed. It no longer exists on the internet, and for good reason. CEO Michael Seibel stated, "We regret that this has occurred and respect the privacy of the broadcaster and his family during this time. We have policies in place to discourage the distribution of distressing content, and our community monitors the site accordingly. This content was flagged by our community, reviewed, and removed according to our terms of service." He also encouraged viewers to be more vigilant and active in the future. So, at least officially, the video no longer exists. The company doesn't either, as a matter of fact. It would later become Twitch. But the memory of Abraham Biggs lives on, a haunting reminder of what people are capable of and the depravity of the internet when left to its own devices. The Crow. November 27th, 1940, San Francisco, California. A Chinese-American boy is born under the name Li Jun-fan. His father was an opera singer and had traveled to the States for an opera tour in Chinatown. Given his U.S. birth, he was a citizen, and after a string of messy teenage fights in Hong Kong and his father's brutal opiate addiction, he, at the age of 18, moved to Seattle, Washington. Here, he would continue training in martial arts and become one of the biggest movie stars of all time, single-handedly bringing martial arts to an American audience and becoming the first Chinese-American superstar. While his birth name is Li Jun-fan, you know him as Bruce Lee, and he was a sensation. Beginning his career on the television show The Green Hornet, Bruce Lee was responsible for popularizing Wing Chun, a Chinese martial art that focuses on close-range, hand-to-hand combat. He was asked to fight more like an American, but he refused. And the style he showcased was so incredibly popular and foreign to American audiences, it wasn't long before he was showcasing those same skills in other hit movies. The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Game of Death. Of his 8 biggest movies, they grossed an incredible $740 million, or approximately $4 billion adjusted for inflation. And that isn't shocking, considering, well, the guy was a powerhouse. According to his contemporaries, Bruce Lee's style of fighting was so fast, it couldn't be seen on camera. He had to slow it down for audiences. He was a master of martial arts, one of the most valuable entertainers of his day, and gained global recognition for it. But unfortunately, his star was fading. On May 10th, 1973, Bruce Lee collapsed during an ADR session for one of his movies and died at the hospital. Several of his movies were released posthumously, and Hollywood went into mourning. Who could replace the wickedly talented martial artist? Who could fill such big shoes? Well, thankfully, another Lee was coming of age. Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee. Bruce had taught his son everything he knew about martial arts, and by the age of 5, Brandon was capable of kicking through a 1-inch wooden board. As a child, he attended his father on set and became interested in the movie industry, and by the time he was in his early teens, he decided to become an actor. After his father's death, Brandon was determined to continue his father's legacy, and although he found some minor success doing smaller films like Showdown and Little Tokyo, he didn't achieve mainstream financial or critical success. The studios and the public didn't know if Brandon was capable of achieving the same success as his father, so Brandon waited patiently, picking up smaller roles, until he got his big break. The Crow. Written by James O'Barr after the unexpected death of his wife, The Crow was a comic book release series released in 1989, and before long, it was an underground hit. The plot of the story is a little convoluted, so I'll boil it down to the fundamentals. A rocker named Eric Draven and his fiancée are brutally assaulted and killed, and 1 year later, Eric is resurrected by the spirit of the Crow and goes on a revenge mission to kill all the people who killed his fiancée. It's a macabre, supernatural superhero thriller. The actual conception of the film was complicated. Originally, when it was first being pitched to studios, the first major studio approach ended in a withdrawal because they wanted it to be a musical starring Michael Jackson, which is crazy, but it was the 90s. Eventually, it made its way to New Line Cinema, who wanted the film to star either Christian Slater or River Phoenix. In development, it was discussed bringing in Brandon Lee to star, but the author, James O'Barr, didn't see it. He didn't think Brandon was right for the role. He didn't believe Brandon could reach deep and dig for the gritty character he'd written. Eventually, Brandon convinced him, dropping 20 pounds to star as Eric Draven, and after months of debate, he'd gotten the role. The Crow was going to be Brandon Lee's big break. It was a big title with a principal role, and it would break Brandon out from the martial arts typecast. They began filming in February of 1993, and in March of that same year, Just a month after they began shooting, tragedy struck. Brandon was filming a scene where his character, Eric, is shot after witnessing the assault and murder of his wife. In the scene, actor Michael Massey's character, Funboy, shoots Eric with a .44 Magnum as he walks in the room. And for this particular scene, they would need a close-up of the gun. Now, typically, the guns we see in film and TV aren't real. At least, most aren't. When guns are shot in close-up, they will sometimes use real guns, but the ammunition will be fake. These fake rounds of ammunition are called dummy rounds. Essentially, they are real bullets, but with no powder or primer, meaning when the gun goes off, it doesn't fire, but it looks realistic, because it is, in essence, real. Normally, production would purchase commercial dummy bullets for a scene, but given the tight shooting schedule and an even tighter budget, production elected to make the dummy bullets themselves. They did this by pulling the bullets from live rounds, dumping the powder, and reinserting the bullet, but the primer remained. For those of you who aren't familiar, the primer is essentially a small explosive. When the gun is triggered, it ignites the primer, which in turn ignites the powder, which sets off the gun. Now, without the powder, it wouldn't fire an actual bullet, but if the gun were fired, the primer has enough force to launch the bullet. Not far enough to leave the barrel, but just enough to get it stuck. 2 weeks before the scene, witnesses reported seeing an unsupervised actor firing that gun with the homemade dummy rounds. And all of this led to the fatal day. The lights were hot, the set was decorated, actors flooded the soundstage, and with the call of action, the cameras began to roll. Michael fired the gun at Brandon Lee, which was primed with blank rounds. Now, these rounds are different. Blank rounds are rounds of ammunition with powder and primer, just no bullet. But the prop supervisor hadn't checked the gun, and in the barrel was the stuck bullet from 2 weeks earlier. So with primer, powder, and now a bullet, Massey pulled the trigger. And to everyone's horror, Brandon Lee was shot, square in the abdomen. At first, they didn't realize. Brandon was supposed to fall forwards, but oddly, he fell backwards. When the director, Alex Proyas, yelled cut, Brandon didn't move. He thought Brandon was just acting or playing a joke. That was until someone checked his pulse, and it was dangerously slow. Brandon Lee was rushed to the hospital. Attempts were made to save his life, but they were unsuccessful. And after 6 hours of emergency surgery, Brandon Lee was declared dead. Production debated whether or not to continue the movie, and after months of deliberation and legal obligation, they did. Seeing how Brandon only had 3 more days of shooting to complete, they rewrote part of the script, shot some of his scenes with body doubles and early CGI face replacement, and the movie was complete. The footage of Brandon Lee's death existed for a time but was destroyed after a thorough police investigation at the request of the Lee family. It will never be recovered. And frankly, it's for the best. The Crow went on to gross $94 million at the box office, which is about $140 million today, and is Brandon Lee's biggest hit. A cult classic, well remembered, and an undebated success. Rest in peace, Brandon Lee. Siegfried and Roy. Sticking with the theme of entertainment, enter Siegfried and Roy, the power couple magic act that took Las Vegas by storm for almost 40 years. And originally, I wasn't going to include the two magicians, but this story is so insanely good, I just had to include it. Here it goes. First, let's meet the showstoppers. Both Siegfried and Roy were both born in German-occupied Europe under the Stormtrooper armband boy regime. I can't say the group because of YouTube's guidelines, but it's the 1940s in Germany, and the dictator has a funny mustache. You know who I'm talking about. Anyway, both of their fathers were alcoholics, violent, rage-filled soldiers. Siegfried found an escape from his abusive household in the performance of magic tricks. He picked up a book on magic at a young age and practiced all through his adolescence. He enjoyed card tricks, optical illusions, and fun trickery. It brought him joy, making family members laugh and leaving his friends in awe and amazement. Roy, on the other hand, took a liking to animals. He had taken care of his family dog for many years, and with this newfound responsibility, he came to love any creature with 4 legs, and the more exotic, the better. A family friend founded a zoo in Bremen, Germany, so Roy had access to exotic animals from a young age. Eventually, both of them naturalized to the United States and started working on a cruise ship. At the time, they didn't know each other. Roy had taken the job to escape his abusive family, working as a waiter and bellboy, and Siegfried was performing in a small magic show on board. One night, Roy challenged Siegfried to pull a cheetah out of his hat, which obviously Siegfried couldn't do. But the request had intrigued Siegfried, and they met up after the show. The two were enamored by one another. Their chemistry was undeniable, and before long, they were performing together, and people loved them. It was clear early on, their charismatic personas dominated any stage. Eventually, and I'm not making this up, the two were fired from their cruise ship gig for smuggling a live cheetah on board the ship in a laundry bag, which is both hysterical and batshit insane. But you know, this was the 60s. Things were different in the 60s. In 1964, the owner of the Astoria Theater in Roy's childhood neighborhood of Bremen saw the two performing on a Caribbean cruise ship. She loved them immediately and hired them to perform at her nightclub. From there, they had a long and outstanding European career, performing all across the European nightclub circuit. And around this time, they started working with tigers. Siegfried and Roy were known for their big cat shows, specifically the use of white tigers and lions. They were the centerpiece of the magic act, not just visually striking and dangerous, but specially trained to perform. The tigers and lions were just as important as the magicians themselves. They gave the show an almost mythical air, disappearing behind clouds of smoke, jumping through hoops, and defying reality. The two performers weren't your typical circus ringmasters, abusing their animals and beating them into submission. They actually truly loved their big cats. They raised each of them from cubs. Roy would personally cuddle with these animals, take photos, talk to them, and hand feed them. There was a trust built between them, a bond. They were also lifetime conservationists. They ran a private compound with dozens of exotic animals, not just tigers and lions, and they took pride in their respectful symbiotic relationship with the great beasts of prey. In 1967, they were discovered by promoter Tony Azzi and asked to perform in Las Vegas. And the rest is history. They performed across Las Vegas for over 36 years. Casinos opened on the promise that Siegfried and Roy would perform, and the draw they had internationally meant a lot of business for Vegas. Together, the pair earned an incredible $300 million over their career. But it all ended in 2003, when the unthinkable happened. A show began at the Mirage Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Siegfried and Roy were about to go on, performing for about 1,500 audience members. The crowd was electric. Everyone expected their typical performance, a world-renowned spectacle, dazzling and amazing. But what they got instead was bloodshed. The tiger's name was Manticore. He was a 7-year-old tiger, raised by the duo, and had been performing with them for years. Now, the exact details of the event are widely debated, but what we do know is that, for whatever reason, as they were performing, Manticore missed his mark. He'd never done that before. The stagehands found it odd, in fact. Siegfried and Roy found it odd. Roy tried to redirect him, but the tiger was confused. For whatever reason, he wasn't sure what to do. His behavior was off. Now, maybe it was the crowd, The flashing lights, the applause, maybe it was just an off day for the 7-foot, 400-pound tiger. But regardless, something was wrong. The tiger was being stubborn. Roy attempted to give Manticore a more direct command by gently pushing the tiger's head. This was a trick he'd used 1,000 times before. Sometimes the animals got confused. They needed more direction. But Manticore wasn't having it. He pushed Roy's hand away, refusing to move. And what happened next is predominantly anecdotal, coming from the audience members who were in attendance. Apparently, Roy tried to signal the tiger again, and this time, Manticore nipped at his hand. Not seeing the danger he was in, Roy attempted once again to get Manticore to move. But Manticore, confused and angry, didn't listen. He bit Roy's wrist. The crowd was confused. They didn't know what was going on, whether or not it was all part of the show, until the music stopped and the stage went silent. Now, Roy had been doing this for years, and he knew this was a dangerous situation. So he took the microphone and smacked the tiger with the rubber head, calling for it to release his hand. Manticore obeyed. The conflict seemed to have ended, but the devastation was just beginning. Attempting to back away, Roy fell on stage, right into the waiting paws of the frustrated Manticore. Now, for those of you who don't realize why this is bad, tigers are instinctual hunters. It didn't matter that Roy had worked with the animal for years. When he fell, the tiger saw him as prey and acted accordingly. Within seconds, Manticore was on top of Roy. The massive tiger bit into Roy's neck and dragged him out of sight. Blood pooled all over the stage. Siegfried jumped into action, trying to get the tiger to release, but Manticore wouldn't budge. Once backstage, the stagehand used fire extinguishers to beat Manticore. And finally, after what felt like years, the tiger let go, running back to his cage. The tiger's teeth had torn Roy's jugular vein, narrowly missing his carotid artery. State medics quickly stopped the bleeding, and all the while, Roy, struggling to breathe, shouted what could have been his last words: "Don't shoot the cat. Don't shoot the cat." A final plea to keep his beloved tiger alive. Roy was rushed to get medical attention. En route to the hospital, he repeatedly called Manticore a great cat and insisted that no harm come to him. Later, he would claim that he had suffered a stroke on stage and that the cat was actually attempting to help him after seeing Roy fall. Over the coming weeks, Roy experienced more stroke-like symptoms and survived damage to his spinal cord from the attack that left him partially paralyzed. Now, like I said, this account of the event is anecdotal. It might not be entirely accurate. It's based on witness testimony because the Mirage refused to release the footage of the attack. That's right, the whole thing was being taped. When asked to release it, they outright refused, only releasing it to Siegfried and Roy themselves, who chose to keep the footage private. As to protect their privacy, that's what they said. I don't know how this constitutes a privacy concern, but whatever. They're cats, their business. But because of this, the footage was never released. And after the attack, the duo stopped performing. Manticore Tiger lived a peaceful life before his death in 2014 at the age of 17. Roy died in 2020, and Siegfried died a year later after being put on hospice for pancreatic cancer. After the attack, the pair attempted to move on, choosing to live a more private life. But no one could forget the terrifying event. It stained their legacy, and today, their magic act is remembered mostly for the horrible event that ended it. And alright guys, that wraps up some horrifying lost media. What did you think about today's video? I thought all the cases in this video were super unique and I've never heard of any of these before. So did you enjoy them? Did you think it was interesting? And if you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out some other videos on the channel if you enjoyed this. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. It means the world. Please subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Spotify. Follow me on Instagram. All that stuff. I appreciate you guys watching. It means the world. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video, and today we will be covering a very exciting topic, terrifying true Reddit stories. And all these stories are true and verified, and some of these are very disturbing. So I'm excited to get into this one because true stories are always one of my favorites just because they are, true and just super interesting, and they're all super scary, unsettling, and some are kind of weird, but I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And these videos are great to listen to if you are studying, sleeping, relaxing, or just want to watch a video. So this video will fit perfectly for whatever you're trying to do. And also, before we get into the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's your channel's goal to be at 500,000 subscribers, so please subscribe to the channel. And all right, without further ado, let's get into some terrifying true Reddit stories. I came across an incredibly creepy family a while back. Okay, I never really post anything on Reddit, mostly just reading, so please excuse me if I do or say anything that isn't common courtesy here. In around 2018 to 2019, I, 25 female at the time, was 18 or 19 and was living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in Nebraska, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones, right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus, his parents were super cool. We could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun, even though I was and am quite scared of the dark. So I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy driving to and from his place if it was late at night, but never had anything happened until one night. The drive out there was a long, winding two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you passed one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through the section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down listening to music, and it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam my brakes on. Right in front of me, in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch black road with thick forest on both sides and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. This was a family of 3, 4, a tall, slim woman, an average height / weight man, a child, short hair but couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a fucking stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered but not nice. They also were not carrying any kind of light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they'd been walking in the pitch black. They're all facing away from me, walking completely silent in the middle of the street the same direction I was heading. I had turned my music down to hear if they were speaking, had music playing, etc. They didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I really had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked to be completely empty. This was the part that sticks in my mind the most. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of three reactions. They immediately think I'm fucking cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I really don't care if no one believes me, honestly. It was, and still is, the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird-ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery / assault / etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option. You dropped your wallet. It's 11:15 at night, and my wallet is in my purse. A little backstory. When I was 19, I lived with my mom in a ranch-style house on a road that backed up to a large field. On the other side was the main highway. About half a mile down from me was a loony farmer, and about a mile on the other side of me was pretty much a crack house. I guess someone used to live there, but it was run down. I'll say that crackheads were pretty quiet. Other than those two houses, we were isolated. At the time, I was working full-time and going to school full-time. One of my classes ended at 10:30 p.m. I often wouldn't get home that day of the week until about 11:15ish. I was driving home one night and I noticed some guy walking down the road. He had a yellow shirt and track pants. I remember his outfit because it was stupid. It wasn't weird to see people walking down my road because of the whole crack house thing, but I instinctively looked over at him when I drove past. He turned and smiled and waved, which freaked me the fuck out. So I sped the half-mile home and pulled into the driveway, weirded out. I made sure all the doors and windows were secure, and then sat on the couch to be a paranoid freak and wait to make sure the dude walked past my house. Except he didn't. And there was another guy with him, dressed in darker clothes. They actually walked up my driveway and started playing around with my car, testing the handles and stuff. In my hurry, I forgot to grab my phone from my car, so I was kind of worried that's what they were after, until the guy in yellow started approaching my door. I'm freaking out, so I go and wake my mom up. She's bleary, and I'm trying to explain the situation when we both hear the doorknob turn, very slowly. Good thing it was deadbolted. She got out of the bed, walked to the door, and then Yellow Shirt knocked. I perched up on the couch so I could get a good look at him and his friend, still in the driveway. The porch light was on because of the sensor. "Yeah?" my mom said. "You dropped your wallet." I told my mom that I had my wallet, it was in my purse, so she calmly told him that she had her wallet, and it was too late to be knocking on people's doors. I remember perfectly what he said next, even though this was about 6 years ago. "Okay. I'm not a bad guy, just so you know." We were all pretty still. No one moved. Not even the guy at the door. Not even when the porch light went off. Then he tried the handle again. My mom told me to call the cops so she could get the gun, and I told her I didn't have my phone. So she walked to the kitchen to grab hers from the charger. She handed me the phone and walked to the bathroom. Stared out the window into the backyard. Then she went to her room to grab her Ruger. I was talking to the cops and explaining the situation all while watching the two guys. Explaining that there were two suspicious guys at her door when my mom came back out and said, "One in our backyard too," which explained why she had looked out the bathroom window. She glimpsed him from the kitchen and went to get a more discreet look. My mom walked back over to the door with her gun and loudly said, "If he tries to handle again, I'm just gonna open the door and shoot him." Fuck knows why she said that instead of waiting for the cops to arrive, but the guys took off down the road. I told her, and she rushed to the bathroom, where the guy apparently in the backyard saw his friend running down the road and sprinted off too. They were going in the direction of the crack house. The cops searched our house and our yard and went to the drug house, where they found 5 dudes hanging around. One was the yellow shirt guy, and I'm assuming his friends were with him. They did get arrested and nothing weird like that ever happened again, but I was on edge for a while. I still make sure the doors are locked at all times every day, even though I live in a much nicer area now. Anyway, sorry it was a bit anticlimactic. The dudes got caught. Either way, weird guys who told me you found my wallet, let's not meet. I'm confident I would have become a missing persons case. I apologize in advance since I'm not a good writer, but I'll do my best to share my experience. To better paint the picture, here's a description of myself at the time of this incident, 3 years ago. 5'5", 26-year-old woman, medium length, bleach blonde hair, curvy, 175 pounds, wearing black high-waisted tights and a pink crop top. 3 years ago, I was walking home late at night from my friend's house. It was dark, and at the time I lived in a rough part of a large city. I've had many sketchy situations that I've always got myself out of, so I guess I felt sort of invincible, like nothing truly scary could happen to me. When I walk alone, I always stay very alert and aware of my surroundings for my own safety just in case. About halfway home and roughly 10 minutes to my apartment, I noticed a van started tailing me. I was used to this since in my city it's very common for a young woman in a rough area to be pro-positioned for sex. It's embarrassing how desensitized to this I was. I did my usual and crossed the road so that I'd be walking beside the traffic heading in the other direction. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The van then turned down a side street, then back onto the road I was on and pulled up to me. At this point, I still wasn't scared. Again, this has happened so many times that it never mattered if I was wearing something that showed more skin, or if I was wearing a winter coat zipped from just below my chin all the way down to my ankles. The area is notorious for that type of activity. I decided to be firm and told the person sternly, "I'm not interested." I noticed there were 2 men in the van. They looked almost identical and may have been twins or brothers. Both men had a very, very dark complexion, dark eyes, and short dark hair. The van didn't move. I was super annoyed and crossed the road again to get away. At this point, I figured this would be enough for them to stop following me. They didn't. They kept circling back every time I crossed the road. I've never had to put that much effort into getting a horny pervert to leave me alone, so this is when I started feeling unsafe. They zipped by me at the speed the traffic was flowing in, and I yelled for them to fuck off. I thought it finally worked. It had been 3 minutes and I hadn't seen the van, so I thought I was in the clear. Just in case, I pulled my phone out and was getting ready to call my sister that I lived with. Just then, the van pulled up to me very quickly, and before I could even blink, one of the men jumped out of the van, opened the back door, and approached me quickly in an aggressive manner as if he was about to scoop me up and throw me in the vehicle. The traffic in that area is very inconsistent. It was dead, and I imagine that is what they were waiting for. Just as the man was about to place his hands on me, I tilted my phone and said, "You're being filmed in my live video chat. I gave my friends your license plate number, and the police have been notified." I was so scared, but I didn't let that show. I stayed as calm as I could. The man paused like he was considering if I was just bluffing or telling the truth, so I tilted the phone more as if to give the fake audience a better look at him. He then jumped into the van and they sped off. I have never been the same since that night. I'm afraid of walking alone now, even in the daytime. Stay safe out there. 2 creeps in a van? Let's not ever meet. I hope karma finds you both soon. Almost gave a serial killer a car ride. So, a little background here. My father was in the Army for 21 years, retired, and moved to a very small town in Central Florida. He got bored after a couple of years, and even though we didn't need the money between his retirement and what my mom was making at a bookkeeper/tax prep, he wanted to go back to work. He started working at various gas stations. And it being a small town, the owners wouldn't care if I came there and helped him out with stocking the coolers or even running the register, as long as I didn't sell any beer or smokes. This all took place in the late 80s and early 90s. The actual story I'm going to tell took place in 1990, and I remember the date well, because it was shortly after my birthday and being 15 in Florida. I had just got my learner's permit. My dad would let me drive him to and from work, just to get some experience on the road, both at day and at night. I was sitting in my usual spot at a table that was set up along the windows, book in hand, feet propped up, and a Mountain Dew on the table along with some snacks. I would generally spend most of the evening that way, reading books, getting up to run the register/stock of the cooler at different times. I remember glancing up because something caught my attention that was unusual, and I realized that a lady was walking up a parking lot from the direction of the interstate. The gas station was right on I-75. This in itself was really strange because where we were located, you didn't get many people walking, and definitely not walking from the direction of the interstate. I figured she had broken down somewhere. It was coming to use the phone to call for a tow truck or something. I was completely wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a few minutes, and I remember getting just a strange and creepy feeling about her. She walked up to the counter and started telling my dad a story about how she had gotten stranded and needed a ride up to the next big town up north from us. Ocala was the town. This is important. My dad lets her know that he's working, and there's no way that he can take her. She turns and looks at me. While she is looking away from him, my dad catches my eye and suddenly shakes his head no. I was confused for a second, but then she turns back to my dad and points at me, asking if I can take her. My dad responded back that I only had a learner's permit, and I wouldn't be able to drive her anywhere and then drive back. Normally, I would have done it, even though it was illegal, because I'd done it a few times before already. I didn't argue with my dad, since this was completely out of character for him. He was normally chatty with the customers, but for whatever reason, he was almost curt and dismissive with her. Turns out, he had a bad vibe about her from the minute he had seen her walking up the drive. Well, she cusses him out for a minute, and he basically tells her to get out of the store. She slammed the door open. I thought the glass was going to break from how hard she slammed it, and then she stalks out of the store and down the driveway. I keep an eye on her and continue to watch as she makes her way back up the interstate and then starts up on the northbound on the ramp. Almost a year passes, and I'm in my bedroom, less than a week before my 16th birthday. I hear my dad yelling from the living room, "Son, get your ass in here and look at this." I quickly run to the living room and see my dad pointing at the TV. I look at the mugshot of the lady up on the screen, and I immediately remember the lady who had been in the store. Turns out, I almost gave a ride to Aileen Wuornos, who was later convicted of being a serial killer and then later put to death. Still have nightmares about what could have happened. That time I accidentally dated a sociopath. It has taken me many years to tell this story out of both fear and embarrassment. I share this today as more than simply therapy for myself, but as a warning to all people. Be careful who you meet on social media. In 2018, my ex-husband and I were at the end of a very tumultuous marriage. He and I had been polyamorous for about 3 years before I met this guy. His name was Jez. I met Jez on OkCupid. I was 28 and he was 42. We hit it off very quickly. After a few weeks of talking, I agreed to meet up with him at a restaurant close to my house. We sat and talked for a few hours before I invited him over to meet my husband. Things went very well, and they seemed to get along, so Jez and I started dating. This guy completely swept me off my feet. Jez was sweet and caring. He enthusiastically listened to every little thing on my mind, engaged, and validated me. Over and over again, he absolutely revered me for my strength and wisdom. He practically worshipped me for all that I was and all I was becoming. He showered me with gifts, flowers, and random good deeds just to make me feel safe, wanted, and cared for. I had never been in a relationship that quite felt like that. It was wonderful. It was as though we had been looking for each other for years. After the first few weeks, he had a meltdown over my polyamorous nature. He, quote, pulled the plug because he said he was already falling for me and couldn't handle sharing me. I stood my ground and accepted this boundary and that fact that I would have to let him go. I left that night sad but confident that I'd done the right thing for the both of us. The next week, he sent me flowers and a card to my workplace, begging for another chance and reassuring me that he would rather try than not and end up regretting it, even though it was scary. He wanted to take this journey with me. We continued dating and it was just as wonderful. Long nights we spent awake talking, sharing, laughing, lovemaking, and planning. We went places and did things that I'd always wanted to do. Then, in the deepest, most intimate moments, when we would just sit in silence, he would grip my hand to his face in solidarity and astonished, asking where I've been all this time. Our time together was effortless. We fit together like puzzle pieces. By August of 2018, my marriage had ended, by no fault of Jez's, and by October, my husband had moved out. I was on lease at a time and knew I couldn't afford the place on my own, so finding a roommate was essential. I had no support system to fall back on, nor did anyone else I know needed a place at the time, so Jez offered to move in. Even then, I was hesitant. We'd only been together for about 4 months, and I knew everything always changes when you move in with a partner. Despite my hesitation, I agreed. He was wonderful to me. How bad could it be? I was not prepared for the change that was to come. It was literally like night and day. Jez suddenly became a different person. He was extremely controlling, jealous, and lazy, nothing like the person I thought I had met. And the way he treated me progressively got worse and worse. Hanging out with friends became a burden, if not impossible, because he would blow up my phone, guilting me about leaving him alone or not involving him in some way. Yet when I tried to, it was also treated as a burden and inconvenience, as he would huff and puff his way through even the concept of leaving space for anyone but ourselves. In December of 2018, we attended my work Christmas party. I'd given him the option whether he wanted to go or not. It was really neither here nor there for me, especially because I had already learned that he really didn't do well if he felt pressured into social situations. I opened the invitation to him because it expressed to me over and over that it was important for him that he was involved in my social life. For the full month he knew about it, he insisted that he wasn't going. I took it as him being introverted and didn't push the issue. I let him know that I would make sure he felt welcome if he decided to go, but not to feel obligated. I was surprised when he changed his mind at the last minute and insisted on going, and even more stunned when we went and he actively acted as though he did not want to be there. Everyone there was incredibly welcoming and included him in the festivities and conversations. However, he still practically grumbled the entire night about the entire thing, mumbling insults and critiquing every little part of the party under his breath, as though being there was absolutely awful to have to endure. No one really seemed to notice the low whispering insults and gripes. At one point, after a couple of glasses of wine, my direct manager leaned into Jez and started praising him. She and I were very close, therefore she was intimately familiar with what I had gone through with my ex-husband. "I'm so happy she has you," she bleated through wine happy. "You've been absolutely transformative for her. It's so nice to see her finally happy and appreciated." Without missing a beat, Jez grimaced at the comment and quickly snapped back. "You don't fucking know me." I honestly didn't believe my ears. It was one of those moments where time stops and you just know you couldn't have heard that correctly. I sat brewing on it for a minute before another lighthearted interaction with Jez prompted him to suddenly snap at me through grit teeth. "Stop it." This triggered me and I lost it. I pulled him outside and asked him what his problem was. I called out his behavior and told him if he was going to act that way, then he could just leave. That if he didn't want to be there, he should have stayed home. He ended up giving a sort of half-assed apology, and we went back inside and finished the party. I remember the drive home that night, staring out the dark window at nothing in particular, in worried silence. I might have messed up, was my only thought through the entire drive. This all started out slow, of course, like waving me away or invalidating my experiences and ideas due to my age, that I was dramatizing my experiences because I was young, etc. The man who, not 6 months prior, had validated me, my trauma and experiences to the ends of the earth. Now, every time I started a story or tried to share anything, even trying to plan out meals for the week, he would openly show annoyance as though I was violating his time and attention. Before I knew it, he was snapping at me over every little thing. If I asked how his day was or talked about my day, I would aggressively shut it down. "Why do you always ask me that? I don't want to talk shop at home. I really don't care about your work. It's work." Before I knew it, I couldn't even bring him a plate of breakfast without being snapped at. It was as though he was testing me. When Jez and I first started dating, he flat out refused to talk about most of his exes. He refused to name them or discuss any of the issues or lessons learned. They, quote, didn't matter, he would claim. They weren't in his life for a reason. It was the same reasoning he also used in reference to my more recent exes, talking about them, including my now ex-husband, may as well have become off limits. Anytime I brought up either of our exes, he would become incredibly agitated, belittling, and just overall very aggressive. I took this as both an age gap issue, as I have a tendency to dwell, as well as insecurity and a threat to the life he was trying to build. However, after he moved in, and this hot button topic had been established several times, he would bring up his exes and how they looked, telling me on more than one occasion. Would have never dated me back in the day, and that I was lucky he lowered his standards. I didn't even really know what to say to this. I would laugh it off and shove it in my back pocket. Noted. And then started bringing up my looks and accusing me of catfishing him. I'd stopped taking care of myself due to the isolation, had also put on some weight, so most of my clothes that I had once felt great in no longer fit. And since Jez had also been dishonest with me about his financial position, he was always needing extra money here and there, leaving me broke almost all of the time. A horrible tragedy happened that following summer. While Jez and I were together, I received notice that a good friend I went to art school with S'd himself in the head while tripping on LSD. Our whole class was devastated. He was, without contest, the best photographer of our class and one of the most kind-hearted individuals I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. Also, as someone who is very familiar with LSD, I was rocked. Jez, however, was far from supportive. He pretty much immediately shrugged it off. That's life. I guess that's what he gets for fucking around with LSD. I was baffled at such an unsympathetic response, and even more later when Jez started to interrogate me about my relationship with this guy, asking when the last time it was that I had even talked to this friend. You don't even know this guy anymore. Who cares? I broke up with him the first time after he called me at work raging. I was busy, so I wasn't able to answer right away. But once I was finally able to answer, I was met with intense anger. It was storming, and one of my dogs was having an anxiety attack due to the storm and separation anxiety. This wasn't the first time, and he was well aware that she needed it in those moments. Why the fuck aren't you answering your calls? You answer when I call you. I don't care where you are. He went on for a few minutes, calling me a shitty girlfriend and laying into me over my sudden distance and lack of communication while I was at work. At this point, I was done, and I lost it. I tore into him over everything, especially causing problems for me at work. That being in my life is a privilege, and if he's gonna wake up every day acting like he hates me, then I don't know what on earth he's even doing with me. I told him that I expected him to get his things and leave. He was always threatening to go back to his old roommates where there was still room. I didn't want him there when I got home, and we could coordinate times for him to come and get the rest. He flat refused, suddenly victimizing himself, claiming he had nowhere to go. How dare you make me fall in love with you? How dare you make me meet your father and then dump me? My manager and her husband ended up following me home that evening because she was concerned for my safety and had offered to let me stay with her for a few days. I will never forget the scene I walked into. Like Theon Greyjoy begging for his life. My boss stood next to me, watching as this 42-year-old man crawled on his knees before me, begging for mercy and communication. At one point, wrapping his arms around my legs, crying into them. I can't believe this is happening. She's the love of my life, you know that? He cried to my boss. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. This was the antithesis of the heartless person I've been spending my days with. I shook him off and went back to the house, gathering enough of my things to get them through the next few days, as well as any and all valuables I could think of. It took a few days, but after about a week, Jez started blowing up my phone. Apology after apology. Suddenly, he was the man I met again, full of humility and self-awareness. He acknowledged the awful way he had treated me and sent me walls and walls of well-thought-out messages, psychoanalyzing his own behavior, where it comes from, and the ways he knows it needs to change. I took him back. Like a dumb, desperate girl. I took him back. It wasn't long into this second round that he started to guilt me over the breakup. My panic had damaged his relationship with the people in my life, and he made sure that I knew it was my responsibility to fix it. It wasn't long after this that my car ended up breaking down at a gas station close to home. There was a very nice couple in the vehicle next to me that came to my rescue and checked things out under my hood. The gentleman turned out to be a mechanic for a living, so he had a pretty good theory about what could potentially be going on. By this time, I'd already attempted to contact Jez to let him know what was going on and where I was. It wasn't long till he got off of work, so he told me to sit tight and he would be there shortly. Meanwhile, this sweet couple stayed put and kept me company while I waited. Jez barreled in about 15 minutes later, completely ignoring the couple that had helped me. Touching base, the gentleman handed me a slip of paper with a name and phone number on it, reviewing what he thought was going on with my car, before Jez butted in, cutting him off. "I said she's fine," he snapped. I could see the woman out of the corner of my eye slink away at this comment and get into the passenger seat of their car. I could feel the sudden tension, like maybe she's been here before. The gentleman didn't move and shifted his attention to me as Jez walked into the store. I could see he was clearly concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked in a low, almost whisper. "You don't have to answer that, but if you need anything..." He looked down at the number in my hand and nodded to it. "Seriously." With that, he got into the driver's seat of his car and drove away. I've thought about that couple countless times since that night. Everything went right back to the way it was before, as though the initial breakup never even happened. The same eggshells, the same belittling. If anything, it was worse, because I had permanently damaged our relationship. If I had not just been so dramatic, if I didn't run away from everything, then maybe he wouldn't have to work so hard for respect in my life. One night we got into an argument. I don't even remember what it was about, but I had to be up early for work the next morning, so I paused the argument in order to get some sleep. When I went to lay down, I heard the TV turn on. I have a sound bar, so the volume can get pretty loud. Jez proceeded to turn the volume up, and up, and up. Far past any volume I ever pushed those same speakers to, even for parties. The very walls were reverberating with the sound of the TV at astronomical volumes. Jez then started laughing hysterically. It was a laughter manic with anger, as though something might be funny on TV, but he might also jump through a window right now. I remember laying in bed absolutely horrified at what was happening. I knew things had gone bad, but now I was scared. I got out of bed and asked him to turn it down, to which he responded, scoffing, "I'll watch TV if I fucking want to," and turn it up even louder. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I started crying at this point, begging him to please just let me sleep. He started mocking me and calling names for crying. "Oh wow, poor baby is crying again. That's your card, isn't it? Crying." This caused the fight to start again, and he started screaming at me, followed me to my bedroom, where he suddenly punched the door, not 2 inches from my head. His eyes were black, and he looked me in my eye, sending the clear, unsympathetic, and hostile message that was a warning. Next time he wouldn't miss. My whole system had shut down at this point, and I sunk to the floor in a panic attack. My ex-husband had issues with violence. Jez knew that. All our rentals prior to that, one had holes in walls and doors peppered throughout our unit due to my ex-husband's inability to handle his own emotions, but he never hit me, or even came close to it. I crumpled to the ground feeling powerless, trapped and afraid. As my thoughts continued to race, he continued to berate and mock my panic state. Most of our argument from that night was a blur, but ended abruptly once he threatened to put my social security number on the dark web. At this point, all that was left in me was to fight. I blacked out and went ballistic, screaming at him to get out. I felt rabid and dangerous as I screamed like a banshee for him to leave my home. It was over, and I was ending it that second. I contacted my landlord and explained what had been going on. Jez would also end up contacting her, weaving his own tale that I was moving out and tried to have the lease transferred into his name. Luckily, since I was several steps ahead of him, my landlord didn't fall for it and contacted me immediately. She personally came and changed my locks for me, gave me the personal contact of a police officer close by in case he showed up again, and took half of my rent off for the next month. I'm forever grateful to her for these simple acts of kindness that are above and beyond anything I would ever expect from my landlord. It took weeks for him to stop messaging me. The only reason I didn't block him was out of fear that he would show up at my house. Though I had contacts for protection, I knew I'd rather get a daily apology video than have to deal with him on my doorstep. So they persisted. For a while. The same act from before. The love bombing, the promises, grasping at straws, trying to find the weak spot where I'd let him back in. But I ignored it. I continued for weeks before he finally gave up. He bowed out gracefully, stating boldly that he will always love me. I left him on red. The illusion was destroyed. It took me several years to pick up the pieces. If my divorce wasn't enough, this definitely made me lose trust in myself. I still don't understand what the endgame was. In one of our last discussions, I asked him desperately, what happened to the guy I fell in love with? Jez looked at me, dead in the eye, smirked, and said, that guy doesn't exist. I told you what I had to tell you in order to get you away from that fucking asshole husband of yours. You're just stupid and fell for it. Jez, let's not meet ever again. I think there is someone living in my shed. Title says it all, but it also doesn't say anything. Lately, I've been noticing something off about home, like there's something else there with me. My wife and our 2 dogs, but I have not been able to put my finger on it until today. For some context, I live in a duplex. We share this property with another guy in his mid-20s. He has his own house and we have ours, but we share the laundry room that leads to our respective backyards that are separated by a fence. This all started about 2 months ago when the guy sent me a text. Hey man, just a heads up, someone stole my bike out of the sunroom. This is extra creepy because to get to our sun/laundry room, you would need to hop the brick fence surrounded by shrubby trees and then hurl the bike over, unless the thief had the most massive pair of balls ever and walked it out through one of our front doors when we weren't home. Either way, I didn't feel right and made more of an effort to keep the door locked. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. I let my dogs into the backyard and one of them starts sniffing at the shed. No big deal. The lizards are coming out with it heating up. They probably just chased one under the door. I finally got them to come in but didn't give it much thought. I hardly ever go into that shed. Nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of out of the way and I'm not really a hang out in the shed type of guy. So we generally use it for storage, suitcases, furniture that doesn't fit/match the house, camping stuff, boring suburban shit. We probably enter it maybe 3 times a year. After the 18th day in a row of my dogs being curious about the shed, I decided to give a little look-see to see if maybe there was a Komodo dragon or something in there, since they wouldn't let this thing go. Nope, no Komodo. But what I did find literally made me piss myself just a little bit. Just a few drops. Inside the shed was the bike that my neighbor had stolen a little while back. My first thought was, oh fuck, my wife is a klepto, but quickly ruled that out. She doesn't even like to bike. Then I was briefly worried that my neighbor thought that I was the thief. I mean, it's in my shed. I don't know how to explain that if he found out. Plus, I wanted to give him his bike back. I kept looking around and found one of our sleeping bags unraveled but balled up behind a box. Inside of it was what looked like to be around $20 in change in singles. There was also a bag for garbage and had lots of food wrappers inside. Eventually, my brain accepted what it was ultimately denying at first and put 2 and 2 together. Someone, I don't know, is living in my shed, or at least was. Maybe my dogs spooked them off, or maybe they sleep there every night and leave during the day. If they weren't coming back, why would they leave the change? I left everything how I found it and was thinking about what I should do next. Whoever did it must have gotten in through the spare set of keys I keep hidden in my backyard. I locked up and brought them inside with me tonight. Hopefully whoever it is gets the message and moves on. I'm going to install cameras tomorrow. I'll keep you guys updated if anything more happens. Please hope for the best and that this person isn't a lunatic. Possible murderer/serial killer encounter in Maine. Not really sure how to begin this, and my title may make more sense after reading my experience. I'll try to be as brief/concise as possible. Summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. My father was stuck in meetings, so he was going to come up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mom wanted to drive up, super annoying to me at the time. We didn't have a choice, and my brother, sister, and I loaded into the car and started the drive. I was about 14 at the time. Drive was uneventful, but there were various delays and we ended up getting in a lot later than originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting from had turned in for the night and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys. Sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were pretty strict about the time frame to pick up the keys. My mom, unfazed, decided she wanted lobster, so we went to one of our favorite spots. She called my dad to see if he could make us reservations at a hotel in Kennebunkport from New York City while we ate. We were enjoying the lobster while a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, my dad calls my mom and my mom excuses herself to speak to him. Apparently, all hotels were booked for the nights, go figure. Height of vacation season in Kennebunkport. The plan was for us to drive to the nearest town and just find somewhere to stay until we could pick up the keys for our vacation home. Apparently, the local had been listening into my mom's conversation and came back over once she got off the phone. I want to say, there was nothing outwardly off about him. He was preppy, clean-cut, unassuming, and fit in with the clientele. He told my mom he had a big home with a big guest house we were more than welcome to stay at, and his wife wouldn't mind. Immediately, my reaction was, F that. No way in the world I was staying in a random dude's house in creepy Maine in the dark. No offense to anyone from Maine, but the streets get creepy. My mom, doing her due diligence, determined this guy was legit. Said he was in finance. My mom was an investment banker. And they chatted enough for my mom to determine he wasn't totally full of it. I called my dad hysterical. He said I was overreacting and that I needed to get out of the city more and accept that sometimes people are just nice. So my brother, sister, and I got into our car and followed him back to his house. The guest house was really nice, fully furnished, but the beds were oddly placed. The guest house had 2 bedrooms, and instead of the beds being located in the middle/centered, imagine a symmetrical room layout, they are right under the window in each room. Just seemed kinda out of place. Anyway, fast forward. We were all getting ready to go to bed. My mom hears a knock on the door and it's the guy. He said he was just checking in to make sure we all got settled. Cool. Nice thing to do. About 30 minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom was like, thanks, we're good. We will stop by the house in the morning to say thank you, etc. Fast forward another 30 to 45 minutes. I can't sleep. I'm terrified. We hear this rustling, which is odd because the guest house was nowhere around trees or close proximity to bushes that might cause such a noise. At this point, I see my mom wide awake and look up at the window, like motioning towards the window with her eyes. Let me add, none of the windows had curtains. The guy said it's because his wife was in the process of redecorating. When I looked up, there was a male figure, just standing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I don't know how long he was there for. When he walked away, my mom waited a bit and then told us to get our stuff together. She wasn't messing around. We had my dad out on the phone at this point. He was pretty much flipping out at my mom about something, but I didn't hear what. My mom said she was going to put our stuff in the car and to follow her out. This was around 2 a.m. When we got into the car, we pulled around to the front of the main house so my mom could return the key and say thanks and get the fuck out of there. However, when we got to the front, all the lights were off. Not just all lights, but it looked like no one had been home. Porch light, table lamp in front windows, everything black. Also, the 2 cars were gone, the local's car, and what we presumed to be his wife's car. After seeing this, my mom, at this point pretty unsettled, said we were leaving and we proceeded to drive to the gate. The gate at the end of the driveway had been deadbolted, or padlocked, shut from the inside. It wasn't a super strong gate, so my dad said rev it. We were in a big SUV, and just get out of there. We drove straight back to New York City, not speaking the entire time. We have never returned back to Maine, and my parents refused to speak about it. I asked a family member one night about it when he was drunk, and all he said was, "They didn't tell you?" The actual owners of that house were on vacation. I'm assuming my mom or dad followed up with local authorities and figured that out, but never told us. I don't know who that man was or what was planned that evening. I was curious as to whether there were any known serial killers or murderers who were in the area at that time, whether traveling through, etc. Sorry for the long post, just trying to be thorough. The night I learned to not sneak out. To start this off, I'd like to give a bit of context. This happened 4 years ago. I'm a girl, and at the time this happened, I was 12 going on 13 in just a month or two. The friend I mentioned in this story was 14 at the time. The friend, Sally, who I was staying with that night, 14, female, was quite a bit older than me. At least at the time, the 2-year age gap was quite big. At 12 to 13 years old, I was about to start my second year of middle school, whereas Sally should have been about to begin her sophomore year of high school. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids. I think that was what drew me to her first. We became fast friends, and before we knew it, we were spending every single weekend together. Seriously, every single weekend. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. I've always been a picky eater, so when her family had dinner, I didn't eat with them. I just snacked on the Pop-Tart that I'd stowed away in my backpack in case they ordered something that I wouldn't eat. Something to note is that her family was pretty religious. I wouldn't go as far to say they were fanatics, but they didn't allow their kids to watch horror movies or anything that was rated PG-13 or older. It didn't stem from the desire to protect them from something inappropriate. Sally's mother had an irrational fear that scary movies had satanic messages. We asked to watch The Purge, and her mom obviously said no. After some negotiating, she agreed to let us watch Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I went to hang out in her room. She put on some music, and being the age we were, we gave each other some makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than just 12 and 14. This part of the night is where things started to seem off to me. Sally wasn't the most positive influence, despite being my best friend at the time. She was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. Sally showed me some texts between her and the man she was talking to. I can't give you the exact recount of them, but they consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him, and just the usual thing you'd expect from a creep online. According to him, he was 19, tall, and blonde with soulful blue eyes. Once I saw the text, I asked if she had a picture of him. Something didn't sit right with me after seeing the messages. She showed me what he looked like, and he was very clearly not 19. This man was at least 40, and looked like he lived in his mother's basement. Then we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation. And when I heard the voice on the other end of the call, I felt like I was going to be sick. "You're so pretty. Why don't you come meet me?" he asked. Sally said that she couldn't because she was spending the night with a friend. The mention of that sparked his interest, and then he proceeded to try and ask both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. Thus begun her plan for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet him in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go. I was raised on stories of what happens to teen girls who meet random men from the internet in person. But after adamant pleading from Sally that she didn't feel safe going by herself, I agreed. We took our phones with us for the walk. I had a kitchen knife stuffed in my bra in case something were to happen and I needed to defend myself. The route we had to take to get there didn't have very many street lamps, and there weren't any houses. We were surrounded by trees on both sides of us. When we got to the parking lot, the only car parked nearby was a black beat-up 2000 Toyota Corolla. The car was still running when we got there, and from what we could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out of the front seat and left the door open behind him before approaching us. I turned my flash on so I could see, and he was obviously on something. I can't tell you what kind of drug it was for the life of me, but his eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He was jittery and kept twitching. I became very conscious of how big he was, maybe 6'2" and around 280 pounds. For reference, my friend and I did not look our ages, even without makeup. I'm about 5'2", my friend was pretty tall, probably around 5'6" to 5'7". We were both significantly smaller than him. The man reached out for us and caught my friend by the arm. I went to get my knife as quickly as I could, and that's when I saw his friends getting out of the car. He invited us back to his car and offered us booze and drugs, but after seeing my knife and that I was ready to call the police, he released my friend. I took Sally's arm and ran faster than I ever had in my entire life. We took the long way home to avoid them finding out where she lived in case they were following us. Once we got there, her family was still sound asleep. We locked all the doors, closed the blinds, and blocked them on everything. There wouldn't be any sleeping that night. We were constantly peeking out the windows, and to our dismay, the same Toyota was circling around our apartment building. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I never mentioned any of this to my parents out of fear of getting grounded or in trouble. I'm 16 now, and they still have no clue. I still get nervous when I see a car similar to the one from that night. As for Sally, her parents never found out either. We agreed to never speak about it again. Thankfully, she moved into a new house just a few weeks after that happened. Safe to say, Sally and I haven't spoken 3 years. She was pissed at me for ruining her night, and our friendship didn't last long after that. We had a pretty bad falling out, but looking back on it now, it was definitely for the better. So, to Sally, thank you for teaching me a very valuable lesson and making me realize that some people are best just left alone. And to the man and his friends who tried to prey upon 2 young girls, let's not ever fucking meet again. People can be absolutely creepy. Hi, I'm a 24-year-old lad living in the UK. I work as a pharmacist at a hospital and I usually do night shifts. My workplace is just a few lots away from home, so I just walk every night. A few months ago, while I was on my way to work at around midnight, a car stopped in front of me and rolled down his window. The guy inside was wearing a scrub suit, so I'm assuming he's a nurse. Have dark hair, chubby, and is probably around my age. Hey, where are you heading? Let me drive you to work. I politely declined. The guy looked harmless, and I guess being polite wouldn't hurt. He looked pretty normal, but there's something in his eyes that unsettles me. He didn't go away after that, and kept insisting to drive me to work. That's when I snapped and told him that I was waiting for my boyfriend, which isn't true because my boyfriend is in the US miles away from me. He seemed to believe in it and just drove away. Days have passed when I got a chat request. I tried to check the profile and saw that it was the creepy lad offering to ride me to work. How he got my name? I have no idea. I didn't pay his chat any attention and just went on with my pretty busy life. 2 days after that, I got another message from him saying, "You were smiling earlier. You look cute." After reading that message, it felt like I had been splashed with an ice-cold bucket of water. Was he at the hospital? I didn't want to know. I told him to stay away from me and F off. Days have passed and I've almost forgotten about this guy when I saw him, standing on the hallway looking at me while I was exiting the room doing rounds. He tried to approach, but I beelined my way to the other hallway and went back to the pharmacy. That's when I started freaking out and told my boyfriend. He advised me to just drive to work instead of walking, and I did right after that night. I also blocked him to avoid any unwanted future creepy messages. So far, I haven't seen him in months and I want to keep it that way. So, to the creepy lad who kept on insisting in driving me to work and stalked me at work, let's not meet again. Small town mentality. Lock your doors. I grew up in a small town, the type where people don't really lock their doors. At least they didn't used to. When I was about 14 female, I got a call to babysit for one of my regulars who had 3 daughters. It was December, so a lot of Christmas work parties were going on. I arrived and we went over to the usual rules. She mentioned the TV upstairs was out, so once I put the girls to bed, just head down there to watch TV. And so after playing with the girls for a while, I sent them off to their bed and headed downstairs. I spent a few hours channel surfing. It was around 1:30 a.m. I remember grabbing the phone, though I can't remember who I was calling, maybe my mom or my sister, to let them know I would be really late. But I heard the door open upstairs, which sort of surprised me. The mom enjoyed the nights I babysat, as she knew I was a night owl who could be there super late, like 3 in the morning, provided she held the cab for me. It was a small town, but I live on the other side of it. As I headed upstairs, I heard someone stumble, so I picked up my pace to make sure she was okay, only to find 3 people I had never seen before. There was a clearly drunk woman lying in the doorway and two guys. The guys looked as surprised to see me as I was them. I asked why they were there. The girl had slurred out that they were there for a party. I was confused and asked if they knew Helen, the mother. One of the guys looked me up and down, and I began getting even more uncomfortable at the whole situation. He asked if I was here alone. I remember not wanting to answer because all I could think of was the fact that there were 3 little girls sleeping in the house. I decided instead of answering him, I would simply state there was no party here and that they needed to leave. The girl was adamant that she was here for the party. The guy who had asked me the question took a step forward. I demanded this time they leave, and we all heard the sound of a phone button being pushed. I'd forgotten it was even in my hand, but it seemed to be enough to startle the guy who thought I pushed it on purpose. The guy quickly told the other guy they were leaving and helped the woman up. As soon as they were outside, I slammed the door and locked it and quickly ran to the front window and watched them. They continued up the block, so it wasn't merely messing up the house numbers for them. The mom returned home 2 hours later and was confused why the door was locked. She was too drunk, so I just told her. It made me feel safe. I feel stupid for not telling someone, but they didn't really do anything. To the 3 drunks that one winter night, let's not meet again. The tip jar, a scary encounter working at a bikini coffee stand at 4 a.m. I am not willing to share the evidence that earned the verified flair with anyone else except the mods for obvious reasons. The tip jar. Against the advice of my parents, I started working at a bikini coffee stand when I was 17 years old and continued working there until I was 20. If you are unfamiliar with bikini coffee stands, they are little drive-through espresso stands, usually painted in some neon color, or the employees all wear lingerie or bikinis while they serve coffee. I know this sounds strange, and believe me, it is strange. However, the money was good. It was fun at the time, and my parents couldn't really afford to pay for college. There is no loudspeaker where customers place their order. They simply drive up to the stand, order coffee, and make small talk as they ogle you in your skimpy symbol. Anyway, it's kind of hard to explain, so maybe just Google it. The Seattle area has them all over the place. Within a matter of months, the boss gave me the busiest shift. The shift began at 4 a.m. and ended at 9:30 a.m. Though the coffee stand was not officially open until 4:30, I had to count the till, grind the espresso beans, fill up the sinks, take stock, clean if needed, etc. The coffee stand was situated in the corner of a large parking lot, sharing the enormous empty lot with only one other retailer. The other retailer didn't open until around 10 a.m., and so when I arrived, the lot was completely dark, save for one dim street lamp above the stand and another in the far corner of the lot. I pulled up to the stand as I normally did, only this time it was my first shift alone. Normally, I worked with one other girl, as the shift would get far too busy for just one person. I had the routine with regular customers, as I literally worked every single day. The boss didn't believe in time off unless requested. While I worked, I could see cars approach the stand and know immediately what drink to prepare, based on my recognizing a regular customer's vehicle. After almost a year on the morning shift, it was rare to see a new vehicle or meet a new customer. My boss was extremely strict about being fast and efficient. He would have us prepare drinks in advance for our regulars while they waited in the line of cars. My boss was so strict that for the first 6 months of my working there, he would watch constantly on his camera system and call me on the business phone to scream at me for the lack of efficiency. After this, I became so fast at preparing drinks, I guess he decided he would save money by having me work alone in the very early morning hours. He was stingy too. So, like normal, I approached the stand and punched in the access code. I went inside and turned on some music right away to keep myself company. The street lamp directly above the coffee stand had burnt out a few days before, so it was rather dark outside. Coupled with the tinted sliding windows of the coffee stand and the knowledge that I was completely alone, I felt a little creeped out. Though not nearly as creeped out and terrified as I was about to feel in a few minutes. Even though the stand was technically open at 4:30, I wouldn't expect my first customer until about 4:45. I usually arrived at 4, but since it was my first shift alone, I came in at 3:30 to give myself enough time to complete all of the opening tasks. My first customer was always Dave. He drove a red sports car and ordered a double cappuccino, heavy on the foam. He worked for the local Boeing plant and would brag about his high-ranking job in between awkward remarks about my body. You would get used to this sort of thing after a while, but nothing could prepare me for the sort of thing that happened to me on this particular dark morning. Though many of the customers were pervy men like Dave, most of the early morning customers weren't as lecherous as one would expect. They simply needed coffee, and no other business was open as early as ours. In fact, many of my early morning customers were married men in soccer mom vans, in desperate need of caffeine. I glanced up at the clock as I opened the money in the till. 3:50 a.m. I finished the count and walked from the back of the stand onto the main floor. There were 2 steps separating the back of the stand from the main floor. The back of the stand had no windows and contained a bathroom, large refrigerator, washer, dryer, etc. This is the area where many of my coworkers and myself would get ready and drove around where customers couldn't see us. As soon as we walked onto the main floor where customers could see us, uniform was required, meaning lingerie or bikini, as well as heels. That morning I was wearing a matching pink lingerie set with knit stockings. The lingerie fully covered my breasts and buttocks and provided more coverage than a typical bikini you would see at a beach. I counted all of the syrup bottles. I opened the fridge and took stock inside. I turned on the espresso grinder and robotically poured in a bag of espresso beans. I started filling up the large commercial sink with soapy water. Music played softly on the stereo. Then I heard it. Over the noise of faucet, coffee grinder, and the music, I wasn't sure I heard anything at first, so I just ignored it. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was tapping on the sliding glass window of the stand. I wiped off my wet hands and grabbed my cell phone. 4:15 a.m. We weren't open for another 15 minutes. I checked the light switches to make sure I didn't accidentally flip on the open sign. Along with an open sign, the stand was equipped with bright floodlights to illuminate the presence of the stand due to the sheer darkness that morning. I'd contemplated turning on the floodlights when I first arrived, but it was strictly forbidden to do so until the stand was open. Without the floodlights on, and through the tinted glass, I could not see who was on the other side. I stood there, staring at the window. Maybe it's just Dave, I rationalized to myself. Tap, tap, tap. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears. The tapping had definitely grew louder. I picked up the business phone and punched in my boss's number. He had an extensive camera system, complete with night vision, and could see in real time both inside and outside of the stand. In the very least, he could tell me who was outside. The phone rang and rang, no answer. I flipped on the floodlights. I walked over to the window and saw the man, now illuminated by the bright lights. His head was pressed up against the glass, hands cupped around his eyes as he tried to see in. I jumped back. "Hi," he yelled through the glass. "Can I get some coffee?" "We aren't open for another 15 minutes, I replied. "My boss will be mad if I open early." "Oh, well, I can wait." The man then walked away from the window and stepped into a small black Honda. I continued my opening duties, warily eyeing the black Honda. At the time, I felt a false sense of security, lulled into the daily routine of my shift. However, this was different. At 4:30, I dutifully turned on the open sign and watched as the man in the black Honda drove up to the window. He was wearing a dark red baseball cap, a thermal shirt, and plaid pajama pants. I opened the sliding window. "Hi, sorry about that. What can I get for you this morning?" I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. The man looked at me for what felt like an eternity. "What I want doesn't appear to be on the menu," he said, not looking up from my crotch. "Okay, so I know what you're thinking. What did I expect working in this profession? Gentlemen?" I brushed his comment aside with a laugh. "We have a great white chocolate mocha." I looked around frantically. Where the fuck was the usual morning guy, Dave? I silently prayed another customer would pull up behind this guy. He looked away and stared at his steering wheel. "I want you to be my maid." "Excuse me?" I said, not sure if I heard him correctly. I want you to be my maid. I want you to come over to my house wearing a maid costume with nothing underneath. I want to watch you. If you don't clean correctly, I am going to do whatever I want to you." He paused and gripped his steering wheel tightly. "I am not a nice guy." He looked up at me and smiled. Until that point in my life, I had never seen a truly sinister smile before. I slammed the long serving window shut. I ran to the back of the stand, hyperventilating at this point. I picked up the phone and called my boss repeatedly, no answer. I stood on the steps and peered out the window. The black Honda was gone, replaced by the familiar red of Dave's sports car. I never thought I would be happy to see pervy Dave, but here I was, rushing to the serving window to tell him what had happened. I opened the window, all the while frantically relaying the story. Dave just laughed and muttered something about the guy dreaming. He told me that I was just being paranoid and the guy just had no filter. For some reason, this put me at ease. Dave reached his hand out of the window to place a $5 bill in my tip jar. He tipped this amount each morning. "Wow," he explained. "You just opened and your tip jar is already full. I know you make good coffee, but it's not that great." "Huh?" I said, slamming the register shut. The tip jar rested on the outside window ledge so customers couldn't reach it. I made it a habit of just leaving it outside in between customers, as it could get very busy. I leaned over and looked into the metal canister. Inside the tip jar was a long white envelope that appeared to be stuffed to its capacity. My stomach turned, as I knew it had to be from the guy in the black Honda. "Dave," I said cautiously. "It's from that guy I just told you about. I'm not opening that." Dave sipped his cappuccino and suddenly his goofy demeanor turned serious. "You're right, let me open it. I have gloves." It was late fall and rather cold out. Dave put on his gloves in a dramatic manner, laughing about my paranoia, and proceeded to step outside of his car. He took the envelope out of my tip jar and opened it. "Holy shit," he said, his eyes widening. He held up a stack of $20 bills held together by a rubber band. On the back of the stack was a folded up piece of paper. He unfolded the paper and began reading it. His eyes grew even wider. His hands were shaking ever so slightly. "What? What does it say?" He simply said, "Get dressed and call the police." I snatched the note from him, his jaw slightly agape. The note was laden with spelling errors and looked as if it was written in a child's hand. Oddly, there was rather long words that were attempted but spelled incorrectly. It said some very deranged things. There are some things too sick to mention here, but I'll relay the basic message as best as I can recall. Some things you just never forget, even if you want to. So, here it is, without the spelling errors and the length. It was 2 pages long, front and back. "You will come to my house. When you arrive, I will examine you thoroughly. I will then tie you to the post, and you will be punished for what you do. Every inch of your body will be bruised and sore. Afterward, I will untie you and use you in every way possible." He used a different term, but it is extremely graphic and includes the words hogtied. "You can scream, but no one will hear you. This is your first payment. Upon reading this note and taking this money, you have agreed to follow through. If you do not follow through, you are a stealing, lying whore, and you will be punished more severely than if you cooperated to this initial agreement. You will clean every inch of my house. There will be no mistakes, or there will be more punishment to follow." I got dressed and called the police and my boss, who finally answered. The police arrived and I went to the station to explain in detail what happened. I handed them the note, along with the money for evidence. The female police officer, who appeared to be in charge, nonchalantly told me that I should probably quit my job, that this behavior was to be expected from customers. I told her that I have never experienced anything like this before. My boss reviewed the outside videotape footage. The footage showed a man standing outside of the coffee stand window just staring inside. Occasionally it showed him leaning his head into the glass and cupping his hands around his eyes for a better view. It also showed him rubbing his crotch. Apparently, he'd been standing outside the window since 3:40 a.m., 10 minutes after my initial arrival. At one point, it showed him going back into his car only to re-emerge several minutes later and finally tap on the window. I was shocked to realize that the man had watched me for almost a full hour without my knowledge. I felt stupid and most of all scared. The footage also revealed that the man had his license plates covered with what appeared to be white paper. After reviewing the footage and the note, the police decided that the man posed a potential threat, and that this behavior was not normal. Duh. They sent an undercover cop back to the stand with me. I was shocked that they wanted me to go right back to work not even 2 hours after the incident. The cop sat outside in an SUV while I worked. The plan was this. If the man drove through again, I was to flick the open sign on and off to alert him of the man's presence. I worked, serving all of my regular customers, trying my best to pretend nothing happened. I was told not to recall the incident to any of my coworkers or customers that morning, in case they knew the man and warned him of police involvement. The man did not return that day, but he did return. Little did I know the day was only the beginning of a year-long nightmare. Edit number 2. To all of those who ask, this happened well over 6 years ago. Final update and conclusion. I've been inundated with messages for part 2. Unfortunately, I'm unable to post the rest of the story for LNM because series posts are no longer allowed. I posted part 2 on No Sleep, but unfortunately the guidelines do not allow users to continue stories from LNM over on No Sleep. I'm sure you can find part 2 in a paste bin somewhere, but I will keep it simple and relay a short version of the conclusion. I fully intended to complete this series. Unfortunately, I no longer wish to invest the time nor the energy to keep posting the rest of the story only to have it removed by moderators, which I understand, rules are rules. So I will end this with letting you all know that I am fine now. I'll give you a quick synopsis of how things turned out. The stalking continued for a while, about a year. The stalker left endless creepy gifts for me both at work and at my place of residence, all of which he signed off on as Turner. It got to a point where I couldn't prove it was him because it would often be sent by a courier or a third party. He continued to come by the stand, and at one point, he even promised to leave me alone. My coworker was there. We actually managed to have a very brief discussion in which he apologized and agreed that his behavior was inappropriate. However, he resumed his creepy behavior just days later. The police were of no help and kept insisting me that it would all go away if I just quit my job. I had his license plate, which was out of state, and vehicle description, but apparently the car wasn't even registered. I did not even know this was a possibility. Despite taking a leave of absence, the stalking continued. I didn't want to quit my job, as this was shortly after the recession. My mom, the sole provider of a family of 5, had lost her job, so I wanted to chip in and help her so they wouldn't lose the house. Other bikini stands in the area were not hiring due to the being embroiled in prostitution scandals, all of which were heavily covered by the national media. You have no idea how hard it was, and maybe still is, to get a normal job after having worked as a bikini barista. Employers don't like it on your job history too much. The few of the scariest incidences were being assaulted at an ice freezer outside of the coffee stand. Thankfully, he didn't harm me physically, just grabbed me and touched me inappropriately. Turner coming through the drive-thru completely naked and J-O'ing into a pair of women's underwear. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say all of this on LNM, and a quick snook note, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this on YouTube, so I kind of tried to, censor it a bit. But anyways, back to the story. I've previously omitted this from my story due to the explicit SA nature. If this is in violation of the guidelines, please let me know before removing my post. I will remove it. Another incident occurred when my friend gave me a joint a customer had left for me on our shift. Crazy as it may sound, my regulars fairly often would leave joints in my tip jar instead of money. I like to smoke a lot at the time. I asked my coworker for the customer's name, but she didn't get a chance to ask for it. I was told by my friend/coworker that he had long hair and looked like a hippie. This fits the description of a customer who'd regularly leave joints in my tip jar. I smoked the joint before I went to sleep one night, only to have a massive freakout, full of hallucinations, hysteria, etc. I literally thought I saw ghosts, demons, and fire. I ended up in the hospital. I found out in the hospital that, in addition to having marijuana in my system, I also had a bunch of PCP in my system as well. Later on, Turner would take credit for this joint by sending a text to my phone, letting me know that if I wanted him to smoke me out, that we could get together sometime. I guess he thought this weed was enjoyable. Ha. Of course, I gave his number to the police. I feel like I gave them enough information to get this guy, but I was just never taken seriously, or they had bigger fish to fry. They did find, however, that the phone he used was a burner. Again, I did not plan on and did not previously include this in my story. Just typing this out is giving me horrible flashbacks to that time on PCP. I do my best to never think about this or bring it up. In this period of time, it was evident that one of my coworkers was sharing my personal information with Turner in exchange for money, or maybe just because she didn't like me. This coworker was later arrested on prostitution charges. I ended up relocating and changing my last name, which is surprisingly easy to do. I did this primarily to get away from Turner, but also so I could get a fresh start with a new employment history and get away from the negative energy that had circled my life. I had taken nude photos of myself for my boyfriend at the time, and after we broke up, he leaked them to everyone on my contact list, including my coworkers, of course. This meant Turner most likely got a hold of the photos as well. It may seem strange to you, but after a while, the stalking becomes part of your life. It's kind of like living around a bunch of rattlesnakes. You may feel constantly on guard and on edge, but eventually you work your daily routine around trying your best to avoid the snakes so you don't get bitten. When it happens, you do your best to move on. I have recently found out, within the last few months, that a man fitting my stalker's description was incarcerated some time ago for doing something even more frightening to another barista in the PNW. There were also similar incidences in reports of a man driving through bikini stands naked or with women's underwear. I suspect that this man was most likely Turner. I cannot be sure if it is the same person, as I never was able to find out this person's true first and last name, but I am hopeful that it is him, and he will be locked away for a very long time. I was almost cooked alive. When I was 10, my parents and I went to visit my grandmother for spring break. My cousin also came to visit, and we decided we wanted to go to the YMCA for the day. My grandmother dropped us off and said she would come and pick us up in 4 hours. On that day, the YMCA was empty. There were a couple of adults in the exercise room, but that's it. We went to the basketball court, and after 2 hours of playing tag and shooting baskets, we were bored. I've never been the biggest fan of swimming, but this YMCA had a pretty cool pool, so we changed into our bathing suits and headed in there. The pool was empty except for the lifeguard. We played a bunch of games and swam laps, but after about an hour, there wasn't much left to do, and there was no one except us to hang out with to keep things interesting. So we decided to play a game of seeing how long we could hold our breath underwater. We stood in the shallow end near the clock on the wall so we could time ourselves. Instead of fully submerging, we just stuck our heads face down in the water. We did this a couple of times and I was winning. On our last round, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I figured it was my cousin giving up and telling me that I won, but instead it was a lifeguard who told me to knock it off or she was going to have to ask us to leave the pool. Since we were tired of being in the pool, we figured we'd get out, get dressed, and go back to the basketball court until my grandmother picked us up. We only had an hour left anyways and the water was freezing. As we got out, the lifeguard stopped us and asked if we wanted to go into the sauna to warm up and dry off. The sign said 18 years or older, so of course we were super excited that she allowed us to do that. She walked us to the sauna and locked the door. The door was glass and the interior was made of entirely out of wood. Inside, above the door, there was a clock, probably to help make sure you were not in there for an unsafe amount of time. The lifeguard stand was adjacent to the sauna, but if you looked out the door, you could clearly see it. She followed us in and went over to the thermometer encased in plastic and unlocked it so she could crank up the heat. I figured that she must have to turn it on each time, so I didn't think anything of it. Both my cousin and I were very short girls, and so we couldn't see the temperature that was printed on the thermometer knob, but I know she was turning up the heat. Then she left and shut the door behind her. I thought I saw her lock the door too, but I thought to myself, why would she lock the door when we might want to get out? I checked the clock and decided we should get out in 10 or 15 minutes. It was already pretty warm in the sauna, but now the room was blazing. It felt nice because I was so cold from the pool. After about 15 minutes, it was starting to get a little bit too hot, and my cousin agreed that we should leave so we can get dressed. I went to turn the knob on the door, but it wasn't budging. I thought maybe it was jammed, so I shook it, but it still wasn't opening, and then I let my cousin try. She couldn't get it open either. We figured the lifeguard would be back in a couple of minutes, so we sat back down and waited. The room was getting hotter now too, and I really wanted to leave. I got up and started banging on the door and shaking/twisting the knob, trying to get the lifeguard's attention. My cousin got up and joined me. We started screaming at the top of our lungs for her to let us out, but she just stared straight ahead. I don't think there's any way that she couldn't have noticed or heard two little girls banging and kicking the door and screaming. Now we had been in there for about 25 minutes. It was so hot in the sauna that it hurt to breathe. It felt like my lungs were on fire. My eyes and skin were burning. We sat back down and put our towels over our heads because they were still a little damp and it made it easier to breathe. I was so worried about my cousin as she is a couple of years younger than me. I looked at the clock and saw that we'd been in there for 35 minutes. I got up and walked to the door again and saw the lifeguard still just staring straight ahead. Again, I tried to get her attention by screaming that we needed it out and banging on the door as hard as I could, but still nothing. I was starting to get pretty dizzy, so I went to go sit back down, but the wooden seats on the sauna were burned my skin. My towel was completely dry, so I put it underneath me to sit on. My hair was also dry, but I wrapped it across my face to cover my nose, and I squinted my eyes so that they didn't burn as bad, but I could still watch if anyone walked past the door. It helped a little bit. My cousin was laying face down with the towel over her head, not moving or saying anything, so I nudged her to make sure that she was still okay. She was, but I could tell that we really needed to get out of there soon because she seemed a little bit disoriented. It had been 45 minutes now, and I was extremely nauseous. There was no way that the lifeguard would forget that we were in there, and I thought she would have to come back soon, but there was this little voice in my head telling me that maybe she purposely locked us in there. Finally, a man walked past the door towards the pool, but for some reason, I just couldn't get up. My whole body was on fire and I felt so dizzy. Luckily, this man wasn't going to the pool. He wanted to be let into the sauna and came back with a lifeguard. I saw them walking this way and immediately jumped up to grab my cousin. I knew now that for sure she had locked us in there because she pulled out her keys to unlock the door and let the man in. I didn't want to take any chances of us being trapped in there any longer, so as the man was trying to walk in, I was trying to shove our way out. As we were going out, the lifeguard started trying to shut the door and push us back in. The man was clearly confused about what was going on and said, I think they want out. The lifeguard let out a sigh and opened the door fully as we ran as fast as we could into the changing room. We only had about 10 minutes before a grandmother was supposed to pick us up. We were both so shaken by what just happened that we didn't say anything to each other as we got dressed on the car ride home. When we got back to the house, my parents were making us dinner. I told them the story of what just happened. They thought that I must have been exaggerating, and they didn't believe me. I truly think that woman was going to let us cook alive in there. The only bit of doubt that I have is what would have happened if we actually died. She obviously would have gotten the blame. What was her endgame? I'm 21 now, and I think about this interaction all the time, and when I'm in small spaces or I get too warm, I still have panic attacks. No one believes this story, and I get it, it's pretty absurd. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask for opinions, but do you think that this could have been some crazy misunderstanding, or do you think that she really just left us in there to die? And why? So, to the lifeguard at the YMCA, please, let's not meet again. I dodged being murdered by my psychotic roommate just by a hair, with real news articles. I'm a 36-year-old female in Sweden. I have worked in mental health care for the last 18 years, mainly with people with psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia. I was working at a group home for 9 years, and were very close with my coworkers there, especially 2 females. The last few years I worked there, another female started working there, let's call her M, and the 4 of us grew very close. She was very timid, shy, friendly, and we got along well. She was, however, often on long-term sick leave because of her own mental health issues, so we didn't meet much at work. But she always showed up at our after-work dinners, so we continued to stay in touch even when she wasn't well enough to work full-time. She told us that she had a history of schizophrenia herself, just like the patients we were treating, but that she was medicated and hadn't had any psychotic episodes for years. Since I have an education in psychiatry and a long experience with schizophrenia, I have no judgment towards people suffering from the illness, and it didn't bother me being friends with someone who had a diagnosis like that. And even after what I will tell you, I still feel the same way. In the summer of 2023, I had moved on to work at a new place, also within mental health, but this time forensic psychiatry, like a halfway house for mentally ill murderers, etc. The four of us stayed in touch and still met every now and then for dinner parties. Em told us that she had been evicted from her apartment because of an incident where she had accidentally entered her neighbor's apartment in the middle of the night. She told us that in the huge apartment complex, the doors all look exactly the same, and that she simply walked in the wrong door by accident, and that the neighbors had created a scene out of pure drama and reported her to the police. I somehow felt that while that sounded out of proportion to evict someone just for that, perhaps the landlord took that kind of action because he judged her based on the medical history, and I felt bad for her. I questioned her if something else happened, and she claimed that it didn't, and that was the full story. In Sweden, it's very difficult to get a contract for an apartment when you have gotten evicted. You pretty much get blacklisted. Em asked me if she could move in with me, since she was literally on the street, literally homeless. I said, of course you can. I've always gotten myself into uncomfortable situations by saying yes instead of thinking about myself, and I had no idea how severe the situation would get when I said yes to Em. I live in a pretty small apartment. It's one bedroom that pretty much only fits a bed and a desk, a living room that fits a couch and a TV, no room for an extra bed, a small kitchen, and a small bathroom. I have 2 cats. We decided that Em was going to live in the living room, and I offered her to throw my couch out so she could have a bed there. And she said that she was fine with sleeping on the couch since it's comfortable enough. I insisted on giving her a bed, but she declined. There's a door between the living room and a bedroom, but between the living room and hallway there's just an open arch, so she wouldn't have total privacy. I hung up a thick velvet curtain covering the arch so it at least gave her the sense of a door and more privacy than nothing. There's another door from my bedroom to the kitchen, so I have 2 doors to my bedroom. I have to have one of them open at night since my cats wants to go in and out. And they also have their litter boxes in the bathroom and food and water in the kitchen. I naturally kept the kitchen door open and not the living door open, since that's where Em lived and we wanted to keep our privacy somehow. She wasn't working at this time because she was on one of her long-term sick leaves. Well, I was working shifts, so sometimes I had to get up at 6 a.m., and sometimes I didn't get home till like 11 p.m. I have really severe insomnia and need to combine zolpidem, which is Ambien/Stilnoct, with Largene, which is promethazine. And even with this, I still wake up easily. I told her that I would appreciate if she could try to stay quiet those nights when I have to get up at 6 a.m., but that it's fine if she's loud when I'm off work or when I do the evening shifts. She was a heavy smoker and a coffee drinker, so I bought her a coffee machine. Yeah, I know, I'm a weirdo who don't drink coffee very often, so I didn't have one, to make her enjoy her living situation more. The coffee machine and the sink is placed right outside my bedroom door. The kitchen is very small. So the first night together, I had to get up at 6 for my shift. As usual, I had a hard time falling asleep. Em had been up several times that night to go out to smoke, and I woke up every time. At 5 a.m., she started making coffee, and since it's literally outside my bedroom door, I got wide awake from the sounds of it. I asked her in the nicest way possible why she was up this early, asking if she had any plans today. I mean, she's on sick leave, why not sleep at 5 a.m. if you can? And she just said that she couldn't sleep. I said, I'm sorry. I would just appreciate if you could wait with making your coffee till 6 a.m. since I really need this last hour of sleep because of work. Adding to why I need my sleep is that I have epilepsy that gets really bad when I don't get enough sleep. I usually get a lot of seizures when I don't get at least 4 hours of sleep. I knew that I'd probably get seizures at work now, meaning that this day would be both stressful and potentially dangerous for me since there's a huge risk that I fall asleep and hurt myself. And it's not a good thing to get cramps and seizures among mentally unstable criminal clients who you're supposed to care for. I know that it's not an ideal situation to work in that field with my condition, and I can inform you all that I did quit after only 6 months. She said that she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes, but that she would want to try the wait next time I have to work. I accepted it and went on with my day. But things didn't get better. She continued to wake me up early in the morning and through the nights, and continued to promise to stop, but insisted that she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes. I suggested making the coffee the night before, or drinking iced coffee or Coke instead, but she didn't want it. I may add that she demanded for me to be silent at 10 p.m. because that's when she wanted to sleep, and I respected that. She used to get these moments of binge eating where she would empty my fridge and pantry from everything I had. I remember this one time when I had bought a big loaf of bread and she texted me 30 minutes after I left the apartment saying, "Hey, I'm sorry I ate your loaf of bread. I'll buy it back once I get the money." Like an entire loaf of bread in 30 minutes. I had told her when she moved in to feel at home and what's mine is yours, so I couldn't really get mad, but it started to annoy me for two reasons. It was getting kind of expensive since it was such huge amounts, and it was always in inconvenient times of the day, like after an evening shift when the store was closed, and I came home hungry, and she had emptied the kitchen from everything I'd bought the same day. Em had long, black hair that was everywhere, all over the sink, the floor, the bathtub. I'm no clean freak, but I think anyone could understand that this isn't the nicest thing to step in or see everywhere in your house. She also left her fingernails and toenails on the bathroom floor. There was also pee drops on the toilet seat every time she had been to the toilet. I saw a silverfish on my bathroom floor. Never ever seen one before. And they eat hair and skin and nails, so I figured this fella probably enjoyed life because of the new dirty condition my bathroom was in. At first, I didn't want to say it straight out because I thought it would hurt her, and I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so I just put a broom and shovel in the bathroom to imply that we needed to sweep the floor more often. This didn't seem to work, so after a while I told her in the nicest way possible with a smile on my face, "Do you think we could try to clean the floor in the bathroom more often? We tend to lose some hair when we brush it off, and I'm afraid we might get pests. I saw a silverfish the other day. I don't want it to get worse." I always make sure to say we instead of you so she wouldn't feel attacked. She promised to think about it but never changed. I started dating a guy and was head over heels for him. He was also in a roommate situation, so we had a tough time getting any alone time. I asked Em if there's any chance that we could get one night to ourselves every now and then in the apartment, and that she of course would get the apartment to herself as well. She didn't like the idea and claimed that she had nowhere to go. No friends or family. Now, I wasn't asking her to leave the apartment for 24 hours, just a few hours, so we could get just some quality time together. She could just go to the library or take a walk or whatever. I was at work for 8 to 10 hours, 5 days a week, so she got a lot herself. One of my old coworkers realized that this was really tearing at my mood to never get any time for myself, and I started feeling really suffocated. She offered that Em could stay the night at her place. After all, they were friends too. Em said they didn't want to bother her, but we told her that she didn't. They're friends. She's more than welcome. And I really just want one night to myself and my guy. I didn't understand why she made such a big deal over leaving me in the apartment for just one night. She eventually accepted and spent the night there. I spent the night away the next week so she could get more alone time too. When I came home the next morning from my night away, I saw that my cat's water bowl was completely dried out. There was no spill on the floor, and it looked like it had been wiped out with a towel or paper. I had filled it to the brim just the night before. I asked her how this was possible, and she said that the cats must have tipped it out. But there was nothing on the floor, like I said. My cats are overly social and usually cuddle up with strangers after just a few minutes. I noticed that the cats withdrew from her more and more over time. In the last couple of weeks, they never left my bedroom except from when they ate or used the litter box. It seemed like they were scared of her, which I couldn't figure out since she was so timid. I had this old saucepan from the 60s that meant a lot to me. You probably wonder how a saucepan can mean a lot to someone, but it was my grandmother's, and it's the only thing I have that belongs to her. My mother used to cook for me with it when I was little, so it has a great nostalgic value to me. She burnt it one day and made no attempt to clean it. She just left it on the stove and went out to smoke. I found it ruined and cried. She didn't even say I'm sorry. She also broke dishes several times and didn't bother to replace them or apologize. This added to my frustration with her naturally. It had been probably gone 2 months now, and she kept waking me up at night, kept binge eating my food, never cleaned, never left the house, scared my cats, and ruined my things. I realized she stole my prescripted sleeping pills, lots of them as well, and I only get one per night. Not more or less, and as you already know, I really need them. I had 20 of them in my nightstand when I left for work, and when I came home, they were gone. She denied, which is pretty hilarious since no one else could have been there. My frustration was getting heavy. The summer heat was strong, and I felt locked up in my tiny bedroom with my 2 cats, never getting any time to myself, never any alone time with the guy I was dating, except for once every 14th day. My apartment was messy, and she was stealing from me, etc. Out of nowhere, my old elementary school classmate texted me on Facebook asking me how I know M. He had seen that I had posted on Facebook that we were roommates now. I told him that we were old coworkers and that she needed a place to stay because she got evicted. He said, "I know. Do you know why she was evicted?" "Yeah, she accidentally went into her neighbor's apartment." He said, "That's not the full story. She broke in and snuck up to their sleeping baby with a knife in her hand. But luckily, the father woke up and wrestled her down and managed to save the baby." I felt sick to my stomach. Could this be true? It would certainly explain why she was evicted, but it just sounded so horrible, and she is such a timid, nice girl. I had so many questions, but my friend had the full police report. Apparently, the couple that M had broken into was his ex-girlfriend and her family. It seemed that M had a psychosis during the break-in, but those parts weren't public. It was, however, clear to me that she'd been lying to me about what had happened, and about how long she had been mentally stable. I started getting quite paranoid now, and I was already frustrated with everything and really wanted her to move out. We did, however, have a contract that she had 30 days notice. I knew that if I asked her in a harsh way, it would mean 30 days of chaos until she moves out, so I wanted to handle this as nicely as I could. I started looking for cheap hostels for her that I could suggest to her so she wouldn't be on the streets. I sat down with her and told her that I loved living with her and I feel really horrible for this, but I just miss my alone time, that the apartment is too small for 2 people. I said it wasn't personal, and that I wouldn't want to live with anyone right now, that I wished it would have worked out, that I am really sorry and hope we will remain friends. She looked crushed and said that it wasn't possible. I showed her the hostel I found and said that I understood that it wasn't the ultimate situation, but I really needed her to move out because I felt suffocated, and also the summer heat was making it, though, to always have the door to the bedroom closed, and that it was tough for me to not get my sleep, etc. She was okay. She was going to try to move out, but not until 30 days had passed, and I said of course. The first night after our talk, she got up and made her coffee at 2:30 a.m. I nearly had a mental breakdown. I was going to get up at 6 and couldn't go back to sleep. I asked her in the morning for probably the 10th time to not make coffee till I get up, but she didn't even answer me. She just sat in the sofa and stared out the window. I said, "M?" And she just kept staring. I was freaked out but left for work. She kept being weird, kept making a mess, kept waking me up, kept eating my food, and all I could think about was the incident with her and the baby and the knife. I eventually got so pissed off about being woken up by the coffee maker, so I plugged it out and stored it in my attic, which she had no access to. It may be childish, but I was getting so tired at this moment. My sleeping pills were stolen, and I was starting to feel like Edward Norton in the beginning of Fight Club. Well, the next night I woke up at 4 a.m. by her making coffee in a saucepan. Not my grandmother's saucepan, that one was ruined. I tried talking to her again, explaining the situation, but she just stared and didn't reply. Me being frustrated and on the tipping point took the saucepan and stored it in the attic as well. I know, but I was going crazy and just wanted her to stop with these nightly coffee routines and get the hint. The third night, I had the guy I was dating sleeping at our place because I was getting really paranoid now over her weird behavior. Not speaking with me, just staring into space. I woke up from my very light snooze by him poking me. He whispered, "Look," in the doorway. M was just standing silently staring at us. This was like a scene from a horror movie, with her long black hair over her face. I kid you not. I didn't say anything at first because I wanted to know if she just stood there for a second doing something by the door, but I realized after a while that she was actually just standing like staring at us. It reminded me of the ending of Paranormal Activity when Katie just stares at Micah in the final scene. So I sat up and said, "What are you doing?" But before I could finish the sentence, she slammed the door shut and I heard the sound of something metal falling on the floor and her running into the living room. I yelled out, "You need to leave," and started crying hysterically because this was turning into a fucking nightmare. Of course I didn't go back to sleep, and I was really happy that I had company that night. I just kept asking myself, had she done this before? Stared at me in my sleep? The next day when I got out of bed, I opened the door and she had slammed shut and saw a kitchen knife on the floor. So that was the metal sound I had heard before she ran off. I took all my knives and locked in the attic as well. I then asked a friend of mine to come to my house and be here when I tell her that she has to move out immediately. That I can't wait 30 days, 27 days. During the conversation, I really tried to stay calm. I know she has a mental illness. I know she means no harm, even though I was so frustrated I couldn't hate her. I was mostly scared and tired. She, however, didn't even answer when I talked to her. She just kept staring out the window. She left the apartment and sent me a text instead saying that I was disrespectful for bringing a friend over to her place. Nighttime came and I thought this would be a quiet night finally. No coffee maker or saucepans. But at 3 a.m. I woke up by her burning dry coffee powder in a frying pan. At this moment, I just felt terrified of her. Her face was dead. Her eyes were black. I suspected that she had gone into a psychosis. I stopped the fire and just ran off into the living room in silence. I knew she had an appointment with her psychiatrist the next day, and while she was away, I packed all her things. I then sent her a text telling her that she needed to pick them up and give me the keys back, and that I will give her money for a hostel the upcoming 26 days. She didn't reply. The guy I was seeing came to keep me company in case she would fight about it. She didn't. She left the keys without looking at us and left. Our coworkers who were friends with us both told me that she moved in with a guy she was dating, and she stayed there for a few weeks till she somehow amazingly got an apartment of her own. She started working again, and I was really happy to hear this. She seemed to do well. Then in January of this year, one of our old coworkers told me that M had called her and told her that everything must burn, that she had a baby that she must save, and other delusional stuff. She had called 112, Swedish emergency number like 911 about this, but they hadn't taken it seriously. M had then proceeded to burn her entire apartment down because the voices in her head was telling her that she has to burn everything to save her friends and family. Her neighbors had tried to rescue her from the fire, but she had fought them off and ran back in and poured liquor on the fire to make it burn more. She was arrested and sentenced last week for aggravated arson. She'll serve her time in a mental institution/prison for a long time, possibly forever. What's ironic is that she'll probably be in the facility where I used to work, and end up where she used to work herself. My old coworker was a witness at the trial, and apparently she had stopped taking her medication because she thought it made her feel numb, and she thought she was stable enough to function without it. Apparently not. She had also stopped taking her medication the last few weeks when she stayed at my house. So when she stared blankly into space, she was going into psychosis. When she stared at me with the knife in her hand, when she burned the frying pan that last night, it's disturbing to think about what would have happened to me and my cats if she would have stayed, or if I would have been a heavy sleeper. I also think about what would have happened to that baby that she snuck into before she was evicted. And yeah, I know, it's crazy that I didn't just throw her out by then. It was complicated. The reason why I haven't been able to talk about it with my friends is because they sympathize with her and have minimized my experience, and they think that I make a bigger deal out of it than I believe it has been. I sort of understand it since they have never seen the darkness in her eyes that I saw those last couple of days. Update May 16th. I just remembered some other things that I wanted to add it to the post. There were several times when I was going to work early in the morning as she occupied the bathroom by taking long baths. I patiently tried to wait till the last minute before knocking and asking her if she could get up and get back in after I had gotten ready and left for work. Just another thing that added to my frustration. I felt really ill one time when she was staying there. I didn't know at the time what it was, but I woke up early in the morning one day feeling very nauseated. On my way to the bathroom, I literally shit myself and threw up at the same time. It takes like 10 seconds to get to the bathroom, so you can imagine how bad it was when I didn't even make it, LMAO. I had a really high fever and kept throwing up and shitting myself all morning, and anyone who has been this ill would understand that you want the bathroom to yourself. Actually, I think it's pretty understandable that you'd want to be completely alone when you're this ill. My head was spinning and I was nearly hallucinating from the high fevers. One random thing I laugh about today is that it was Eurovision week, and for some reason the flute solo from Moldova's song was stuck on repeat in my head when I was in and out of fever dreams. I have a hard time listening to it today, haha. Anyway, working in healthcare, I also have a natural instinct of not wanting to spread infections, so my first thought was that besides wanting to be alone, I didn't want to risk giving whatever this was to M. So I begged her the moment I noticed I was ill to please leave for her own sake. I could barely speak because it made me throw up that easily. Our friend in common had asked her to water her plants that week, so she had the keys to her place and could have been alone there. M refused to leave, and I swear, if I had the energy to slip out of the window and fall to my death, I would have, but I couldn't. I was half sitting / half laying on the toilet with a bucket in my lap, my head sort of resting in the bucket of puke because I couldn't hold it up of the high fever, and I just begged through whispers for her to leave so she wouldn't be ill. I told her, "What if you get sick soon too? We can't share the toilet. I'll be here all day. You just go to her place before it's too late, please." Eventually she left, pissed at me. It turned out I had a severe case of food poisoning and I was well again after 2 days, but my god, the fact that she refused to leave is something I felt I had to add to the story because it made me so frustrated too. I also went through our conversations and saw me asking her how long the door had been closed. That reminded me that she used to shut my cats inside my bedroom while I was away at work or whatever, so they couldn't eat, drink, or use the litter boxes. She claimed she just recently closed it because she was trying to sleep, but I remember she did it in the middle of the day one time, the last few days too. And alright guys, that wraps up the terrifying true Reddit stories. I really hope you enjoyed this video because these stories were very interesting and, like I said, all true, so it makes them very scary in my opinion. But let me know what you'd like to see in the future, what type of stories. What else would you like me to cover? What did you like about the video? What did you not like about this video? And thank you so much for watching to the very end of this video. If you haven't liked the video, please like the video. It helps a ton. And also subscribe to the channel. It's the channel's goal to get 500,000 subscribers. So please subscribe. And all right, enough with the outro. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video, and today we're going to be getting into something a little bit different, some Reddit confessions, and more particularly, disturbing Reddit confessions. And this is a new series I think I'm going to start for the channel. If you guys like this video and perceive it well, and comment down below that you enjoy this, I'll continue and make it a series and post more videos like this in the future, but these are super interesting stories and posts, and this could be a phenomenal series. They're all super interesting, and thank you so much for stopping by. And before we get into this video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's a channel's goal to be at 500,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I think we can do it, so please subscribe. And alright, anyways, without further ado, let's get into some disturbing Reddit confessions. I stood by and allowed my wife to almost kill our son. I was happy she did it. Okay, fair warning. This one is long as hell. Apologies for that, but this is very hard for me, and I've been carrying it for a lot of years. On the advice of my therapist, I've written it all out to try to work out my feelings on it. He didn't advise me to submit it to Reddit, of course, but I have struggled with this for a long time, and I need to hear other people's opinion on it. I still really have no idea how I feel about it, even after all these years, but I will submit for judgment by the masses. I know I did wrong on some things, probably a lot of things. I tried to do my best that I could. My son was very troubled. Very troubled. If you have seen the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin, it will really help to understand what I'm talking about, because I swear to God, when I watched that film, I thought I was watching a documentary of my life. I felt like the writer must have had cameras hidden in my damn house. That's how accurate it was. The only difference is that in the movie, the boy appears normal to his father and only reveals his true nature to his mother. With my son, he didn't have that mask. His insane behavior was the same with everyone. From the day he was born, my son just came out wrong. He was planned, my wife and I tried to get pregnant, and were ecstatic when he was born. He was wanted and loved. We showered affection on him and really tried to give him a happy childhood. But from the day we brought him home from the hospital, he was miserable. He cried for 13 months straight. I'm not exaggerating. 13 months without a break. He cried until he had no voice left and kept crying. You could see his little face scrunched up and no sound coming out, totally hoarse. There were times he would literally be crying in his sleep. I've never seen or heard of any other kids able to do that. We brought him to doctors, specialists, tried changing his diet, held him, rocked him, toys, swaddling, music, mobiles, everything we could think of. Nothing worked. 13 months of grading, grinding, no sleep, hell. Once he got over the crying stage, we thought we were out of the woods, but it quickly became clear that for some unknown reason, he was just angry at being alive. I never saw that kid have a genuine, joyous smile once in the time I knew him. I saw him grin a vicious, horrible grin many times, taking a perverse pleasure from causing pain or suffering or breaking a rule. But a smile from real pleasure at something nice? No, never. Not once. He had no interest in anything positive. He was fueled by hate, and everything he did was bent toward that. As soon as he could walk, his mission in life was to destroy things. He would break or try to break anything that came in his range, smash it, chew it, throw it in the toilet, whatever he could. After a while, he figured out how to get his diaper off and took great pleasure in shitting and pissing anywhere he could. After a while, he figured out he could hide it and started pissing and shitting in places we wouldn't find right away, grinding it into carpets, making it even more of a problem to clean, and making the house stink. When he got older, ages 9 to 15, he would piss and shit in our bed until we got a lock on our door and he wasn't able to get in anymore. Then he'd just take a dump in the hallway in front of our room. That biological warfare started around 2.5 years old, and he never grew out of it. I'll try to speed it up, as I could literally go on for days about this stuff, but as he grew older, he became more and more unmanageable. He would bite, kick, scream, scratch, and spit at anyone trying to do anything with him. He was kicked out of school twice before he was 9, then let him back in, and then kicked him out for good. He had to change schools. The next one put him in a special class that kept him away from the other students. We had to install a door and lock on the kitchen because he would steal knives and use them to gouge the walls/furniture or chase people with them. When he was 10, he stabbed me pretty good in the hip and ass. I still have the scars. As he grew older, he grew darker. He moved into setting things on fire and torturing local animals. There was a stray dog that hung around the park near our house. My son blinded it in one eye with a barbecue fork. He would dip cats' tails in gasoline and light them on fire. He became a violent, stinking, vicious beast that lived in our house. We couldn't do anything with him. I will take this opportunity to preempt the tsunami of messages. Yes, we had the kid in fucking therapy. He saw a psychiatrist twice a week and had God knows how many different medications prescribed to him over the years. Nothing worked. Therapy didn't work. Meds didn't work. Nothing fucking worked. He was like a poison cloud of hate and fury, lashing out at anything in his reach. When my son was 16, my wife got pregnant again. I can't tell you how different our reaction was. Instead of joy, we felt horror. This pregnancy had not been planned, and we were at a loss of what to do. My son had been such an unending nightmare for 16 years. We couldn't take the idea of starting again from the beginning. We talked a lot about terminating, but A, access to A, was not as easy in those days as it is now, and B, my wife was very against it. We talked about many options. In the end, we decided that my wife would have the baby, and if it turned out evil, we would put it up for adoption. We knew we just couldn't do it again with another child like our son. We had a daughter. She was very normal. Suddenly, we saw what our lives should have been like the whole time. How things would have been had our son not been himself. She laughed at things. She breastfed without biting. She didn't have teeth yet anyway, but you could tell she was just trying to eat, not tear her mom's breast off. After 4 months, she was sleeping through the night. She was happy. She was normal. I can't describe the relief and happiness that we both felt. I don't have the words for it. This is where I believe I may have started really pulling back from my son. Up until that time, whatever mistakes I made, I had always tried my best to do my best for my son. I'm convinced of that. I tried to help him and love him and care for him. I really tried, but when my daughter was born, my wife and I both instinctively just turned toward her. She became our focus, not from malice, but just because she was so much easier. She was so happy and sweet. Every moment we were with her was just like magic. I understand this was wrong, but we honestly couldn't help it. I don't have a better explanation than that. My son hadn't given a shit about my wife being pregnant. I honestly don't know if he really understood it. But when we brought our daughter home, he started acting out even more. I didn't think it was possible, but he took it up another notch. At this time, he was 17, and we were having blowout screaming matches daily. Usually after we fought, he would storm out of the house and disappear for hours at a time, or come back the next morning. It was a relief. I started to actually look forward to our fights because it would get him away from us for a while. After the birth of our daughter, my relationship with my son was almost entirely gone. Our only real interactions were screaming at each other. My wife was even worse with him. She just had nothing left. By that time, if our son even came into the same room as her, she would just stop whatever she was doing and start screaming, "Get the fuck away from me, get away, get the fuck out," until he left. He started spending more and more time out of the house, which was a blessing for us. I have no idea what he got up to in the world, but we were just happy it wasn't being inflicted on us. As a consequence of our son's behavior, we had invested heavily in locks around our house. All of the cheap, thin interior doors in our home had been replaced with thick, dense wood doors that couldn't be kicked through, equipped with keyed locks that my wife and I carried keys to. I know it sounds extreme, but locks and heavy doors were the best way we had found to create safe spaces from them. And again, before I'm undated with messages, I was not locking my son in rooms like a prisoner. He had free reign of the house and could come and go as he pleased. My wife and I would lock ourselves in rooms to protect ourselves from him. If anything, we were the prisoners in our own home. On the day in question, I had fought with my son in the morning and he had left the house in a rage. My wife and I were enjoying some peace and quiet in the kitchen while our daughter napped in our bedroom. And then my daughter began crying. Any parent who has young children can tell you, you get used to your child's cries and you can tell after a while what they need. They cry differently if they are hungry or need changing or are just restless and want to be held. Babies can communicate pretty well before they can speak. The cry was none of those things. This cry was terror. The second we heard it, my wife and I were both up out of our chairs and running to the room. The door was locked, of course, and it took a few seconds to get the right key to get it open. My son was in the room. We lived in a bungalow, and the bastard had climbed in the window to get her. He was standing over her crib with a steak knife in his hand. I have no idea where he got it. It wasn't one of ours. We controlled our knives very carefully and always kept them in locked drawers. I think he may have stolen it from one of our neighbors' houses. He had broken her skin twice already, once in the belly area and once on her arm. I could see blood running down. When I entered the room, he was dragging the back of the knife down her face, not cutting, almost tickling her with it, teasing her while she screamed. He looked up at us and smiled. Before I knew what I was doing, I was already moving, running to put myself between them. I didn't think about it. I just moved instinctively. Even with that, my wife got there faster. It was like a movie on fast forward. She got to our son and bashed his hand away, knocking the knife across the room and then shoved him with her whole body weight, so hard that he flew away from the crib and bounced off the wall. I picked up my daughter and held her while my wife screamed us. I could see her shaking, almost convulsing. I can remember the smell of the room, the sound of my daughter screaming and wailing. The look of my son's face as he stood there, just nothing. Blank, dead. There was nothing in his eyes. No emotion. He looked like an alien to me. I watched my wife take a step forward. I could have reached out and stopped her, but I didn't. She stepped forward again, very close to him. I could have stopped her again, but I didn't. She waited, looking at him for maybe 3 to 5 seconds without moving, and then she punched him in the face. Now, until this point, you may have been picturing my wife as a typical woman, small frame, dainty, delicate. This is not the case. My wife does have a small frame, but dainty and delicate she is not. Never has she been since I've known her. Since her early teens, my wife has been a boxer. MMA didn't exist back then, but karate and boxing were big in those days, and my wife was a very talented amateur. She was about 130 pounds, she carried a lot of muscle, and she knew how to punch. I had 70 pounds on her back then, and I have no doubt that in a real fight between me and her, She could have and would have pounded me flat. Neither of us had ever laid a hand on her son in anger before, but something broke in her that day, and all the years of anger and pain and sorrow and frustration just came pouring out. When she hit him, his head snapped back and blood started pouring out of his nose. He hardly reacted. He just looked at her with this shocked expression like he didn't know how to process what had just happened. She waited another second, and then she hit him again. I could have reached out and stopped her. I could have dragged her out of the room, taken her away, calmed her. I didn't. I just stood there and watched him while she systematically started to pound him to a pulp. Every time he brought his hands to cover one part, she would blast him somewhere else. Body, head, over and over. He started screaming, crying out, yelling for her to stop. It's the most genuine reaction I'd ever seen him have to anything in his whole life, but she wasn't stopping. I watched her ramping up, hitting harder, faster, working him like a heavy bag. He tried to swing at her and she slipped him easily. She was on autopilot, sinking down into her training. I stood there watching her for a minute. Then I turned my back on them and took my daughter out of the room. I brought my daughter to the kitchen and gave her a bath in the sink. I found that he had cut her a third time on the sole of her foot. All the cuts were superficial. I cleaned her up and held her until she calmed. I put polysporin and band-aids on her cuts. In our bedroom, I could hear my son screaming, calling my wife horrible names, telling her he would cut her head off and F her corpse. After a while, I didn't hear him saying anything anymore. Didn't even hear him crying out. I assumed that he must have been knocked out, but I could still hear her beating him. That went on for a long time, long enough for my daughter to drift off to sleep in my arms. I just sat at the kitchen table waiting for her to finish. Finally, she came out and sat down across from me. Her hands were swollen and red. Her face and arms were splattered with blood. Her chest was heaving. We just stared at each other without saying anything. After a while, I asked her, "Is he dead?" She looked back at me and answered, "I fucking hope so." I nodded. That was all there was to say about that. I understood how she felt perfectly. I felt the same. I didn't know what to do. So we just sat there waiting silently. Eventually, my wife started crying and went to go take a shower. I just stayed where I was, holding our daughter. After a long while, I heard her moaning and sobbing coming from her room. It turned out that my son wasn't dead. I went in to see how bad it was, and it was pretty bad. I've never seen a more merciless beating laid out onto anyone, before or since. He was lying on the floor, rolling around with blood leaking out of his face, lying in a pool of vomit. His nose was squashed flat out across his face. Both of his eyes were completely swollen shut and starting to blacken already. I could see that a couple of his fingers were bent out at weird angles, and he had pissed his pants. I think he must have been missing teeth, but I couldn't see any on the floor, and I couldn't see it inside his mouth. His lips were all puffed up and swollen. From talking to my wife about it later, I know now that she had systematically beaten every part of his body, focusing heavily on his legs. She told me she kicked him in the groin repeatedly until her legs got tired, and had kept beating his body long after he had passed out. When my wife came out of our shower, I still didn't know what to do about her son. I didn't know whether to call the police or an ambulance, take him to the hospital myself. I honestly didn't have any idea what to do. After a while, I realized that I simply didn't care what happened to him anymore, and we decided to just let him live or die on his own. There was an in-law suite in the basement that we had never really used, and my wife, my daughter, and I just moved down there. We simply ceded the top floor of the house to my son and locked everything down, separated our lives entirely. There was plenty of food in the upstairs cabinets, enough for a couple of weeks or more. He had a washroom and bedrooms to use. We had a washroom in the basement, a small kitchenette, and a separate entrance so we could just stop going upstairs. We just decided we were done with him. I figured we'd let his food run out and see what happened next. Over the next week, we could hear him moving around upstairs sometimes. I think he just spent most of his time lying in bed recovering. I went to work, watching on high alert in case he attacked me in the driveway. But he never did. My wife stayed home with our daughter. She was never out of our sight. One night, we heard him going ballistic, smashing things and banging. We didn't respond. He never tried to get downstairs or get near us, though. I think he was afraid that if he got near us again, my wife might finish the job on him. After 3 weeks down in the basement, we hadn't heard anything from up above for a few days, and I ventured upstairs to the main floor of the house. The place was demolished, and there was no sign of my son. He was gone. It took months to repair the damage he had done and get the main floor back to normal again. There was food and shit smeared all over the walls and broken glass on the floor, big holes in the drywall. He had ripped the place apart. He tore up the linoleum in a corner of the kitchen and emptied an entire foam fire extinguisher into the living room. I feel thankful that he didn't burn the house down with us in it. I'm honestly not sure why he didn't. The kid wasn't shy about lighting things on fire. After that, I lived in fear every day that he would come back, that he would ambush us out of the blue and try to kill us. We moved house out about 3 years later, and I finally stopped being afraid that he would show up again, as now we had no idea where we were. I finally felt safe from him. All this happened a long time ago. My son was born in the spring of 1971. My daughter was born in 88. I'm an old man now. I'll be 70 this year, and my wife passed from cancer in 2016. My daughter's 31 now. I moved in with her and her husband after my wife passed. I've got 2 granddaughters, and they are the joy of my life. I see a therapist a couple times a month to talk about this. I don't know where my son is. The last time I saw him was when he was lying on the floor of our bedroom, bleeding and smashed. I haven't heard from him since he left. More than 30 years now. I don't want to. I carry a lot of guilt from that time, and a lot of conflicted emotions. I didn't beat him myself, but I allowed him to be beaten. And I thought he deserved it. I was happy it happened. I didn't try to kill him, but I would have been happy if he died. I will say that I do hope he was able to overcome his demons and go live a normal life somewhere. If he wasn't able to do that, if he stayed the way he was, then I truly do hope someone out there killed him. When I knew him, he was a rabid dog. In whichever way it went, I just hope he isn't still out there hurting anyone else. I'm dying, but haven't told anyone. I was diagnosed with cancer a little over 2 weeks ago, after a regular checkup. Turns out I have a tumor on my colon that has spread to other areas, liver and lung so far, and will require extensive chemo and surgery for any chance to live longer than 8 months. I'm not having any treatment, and I haven't told my wife because she'll only pressure me to get the treatment, which results in months of pain and suffering for a relatively small chance. Instead, I'm making sure our last few months together are filled with only happy memories. I'm starting to work later and finishing earlier in the day, to make her breakfast in bed and take her on dates in the evenings. My landlord I rent my workshop from has agreed to let me run my business rent-free for the next 6 months, which means significantly less financial stress, and I can save a lot more, so she has something to carry her over afterwards. I hope she'll forgive me for taking this path. When I was 16, I took my family pet to the vet, found out he was terminally ill, and never told anyone. I'm the eldest of 4 kids in a family of 6, and growing up we had a beautiful albino chinchilla named Dusty. Dusty was an awesome little pet to have as a kid. Very sweet, never bit anyone, loved to cuddle and run around digging tunnels in the bed sheets. He had this really big cage in our guest bedroom that was connected to my room, and every time someone would walk past his cage, he would run to the gate hoping to be taken out. If you opened the gate, he would just hop right into your hand. Anyway, great pet. So about 3 days after I got my driver's license as a 16-year-old, I noticed that one of Dusty's eyes were tearing a little bit, which I hadn't seen happen before. Feeling like a brand new adult with my new driver's license, I decided to take it upon myself to bring him to the vet and see what was up. So I put him into a brown paper grocery bag with his favorite blanket, made some air holes, stapled it shut, and strapped him into the passenger seat of my family's van. Fast forward maybe a half hour, and I'm sitting in the vet's office holding Dusty, feeling like the most responsible adult ever. The vet is an exotic animals vet and takes a look at him, then asks to do an x-ray. So she sedates him a little, does the x-ray, hands him back to me and leaves the room. Adult level 9,000 as I sit petting him until he wakes back up. So the vet comes back in and sits next to me on a little bench in the checkup room and starts petting him in my lap. She's telling me how wonderful he is and how lucky I am to have such a great little pet, asking me my favorite memories of him, all this. So we are talking, and finally I ask her something, like, okay, so how much do chinchilla eye drops cost, because I've got to get going, and she smiles gently, saying something like, I wish eye drops could fix this. She gives me a hug and starts to explain. Dusty was not bred responsibly and had some kind of internal deformity involving the roots of his teeth putting pressure on his eyes and brain. This would eventually cause an early death. I couldn't believe it. I remember starting to cry and putting Dusty back in his grocery bag with his blanket and asking if the vet had a stapler I could use to close it again. I paid cash to the receptionist for my babysitting money and got into my car crying all the way home. When I got home, I sat in the car for a while in the garage trying to gather myself as Dusty chewed on his bag. Looking back, I'm not really sure why, but in the car I decided not to tell my family the news. The vet said Dusty wasn't in pain despite him tearing eye and we wouldn't have to put him down. She didn't know how long exactly he had left, but guessed maybe a year. I guess I figured I didn't want my family to be sad every time they played with him or passed by his cage, knowing his time was limited. I wanted the rest of his little life to be normal. Eventually, I brought him back into the house and put him into this cage. I went later that day to Petco and bought rodent eye drops as a cover-up and proudly told my family that night how I bought Dusty to the vet to check his eye and lied, saying the doctor gave me eye drops and told me eye irritation is common in chinchillas. Dusty lived 3 more years after that, 2 years longer than the vet had expected. He passed away just shy of his 10th birthday. On the morning he passed, I told my dad what had actually happened at the vet. He told me I was so much more of an adult than I knew. I'm responsible for the deaths of several people. Around 4 years ago, I was a vendor on the dark net. It was a relatively short-lived thing. I was just doing it because I was too lazy to get a job, and at the time, didn't want to settle for the 9-to-5 thing. I wanted to start my own business and use the drug money as a startup. I've been using myself for years. Along with that, I met lots of people with the dealing scene, and eventually started dealing myself. I have a lot of anxiety though, so I hated meeting up with people in parking lots, and I definitely didn't want anyone to know where I lived. That's when I read about the Silk Road, and Ross Ulbricht being caught. Got obsessed with the idea of it. Got obsessed with learning OPSEC, all with the goal of eventually using my connections to start up my store. Well, after a couple of months I did. I started my store with 3 drugs, ketamine, meth, and some outdoor weed my buddy was getting for super cheap. All was doing good for a few months. Had a couple thousand got stolen in an exit scam, but I had about $25,000 saved up at that point, so it didn't ruin my life like a few vendors I knew of. Eventually, I met a local connect that came into town only once a week, but he had fucking anything I wanted. Mescaline, LSD, mushrooms, PCP, even, and fentanyl. At the time, people weren't really cutting heroin with fentanyl. I mean, I'm sure people did plenty, but it was not nearly as commonplace now. People just did fentanyl, and still do. I put all my addresses into an Excel spreadsheet along with their name, zip code, order, along with the amount. At the time, I was selling some super white powdered mescaline. The fentanyl was also a white powder. Very similar consistency. Long story short, my Excel fucked up, or I fucked up, and about 7 people's mescaline orders were filled in as fentanyl orders. They all went out. I didn't notice and kept doing my thing for a few days. After about 5 days, someone contacted me and told me their friend died from my mescaline. I immediately called bullshit and went to check my order log and scale up how much I had of my mescaline left. Well, had about 11 grams or more than I should have. I still don't know how the fuck it could have happened. I wasn't a user, but I was definitely high off dabs. I went to check my order log on the market to see if anyone had finalized on their purchase, and a couple of them were, but none from a specific day, including the person that messaged me. No one that had purchased mescaline that day had finalized their orders. The market I was on also had a feature to see the user's last activity, and none of them have logged in for at least 3 days. Most 2 days. I immediately deactivated my vendor account. I didn't even need confirmation. I knew what happened. I knew I just killed several people. I sold the rest of my drugs, converted my Bitcoin to cash, and moved the fuck away. Didn't speak to anyone for weeks. Found a job in a restaurant, living in a city I always wanted to. I haven't touched drugs since that day. I haven't had anything to do with that life since then. I still think about them every night. I saved their names and Googled them a few days later. I was able to find info on 4 customers that definitely died. 1 customer shared it with a friend. They both died. I don't know why I'm even posting this, mainly because I have no one to tell, and even if I did, I don't think I could. I spend my days sober, clocking into work, clocking out of work, coming home, playing video games. I'm a complete recluse. People I used to know have distanced themselves immensely. and I know it's because I'm a shell of my former self. I can't help it. Could I even tell a therapist about this? I don't feel like I deserve to be alive. Am I really living anyway? I don't even know anymore. Maybe this will help me feel better. I caught my mom, who I thought was an angel, having an affair on my dad. Now I can't stand her and see her for the sociopath she is. I grew up loving my mother dearly, as most sons do. She was protective, kind, beautiful, successful, and smart, and was someone I strove to be like when I was young. However, I wasn't seeing the side of her that is at her core, and within the past 3 years I have come to despise her. She is selfish, manipulative, two-faced, and an overall bad human, which is a tough pill to swallow when I adored her for 25 years. It's weird how you don't really know your parents until you become an adult. This will be long, and if just one person gets through it, then it was worth writing. I just need to get this off my chest. My parents are in their late 50s. My dad is very successful, owner of his own business, and is an all-around good guy. Great father to my sisters and I, and is a way better husband than my mom deserves. They've been together since they were in high school, when in their sophomore year, my mom literally pulled a girl out of his Jeep and got him because she wanted to be with him. Red flag. He is more passive, and my mom is aggressive, obviously. Any honey-do list he got, he did it. Anything my mother wanted, she got. His brother and I even always gave him shit for being so whipped. They went into over $90,000 in debt when I was 13 because my mom wanted a big house, Mercedes, and other crap they couldn't afford at the time. We went on expensive vacations that she planned. We ate at nice restaurants we couldn't afford, and the only thing my dad ever stood his ground on was that he gets to deer hunt with the guys 3 weekends a year, which my mom still bitched about being left out of. She has always had to be the center of whatever he does in his life, no exceptions. But that isn't what made me see her for who she was. 4 years ago, my now wife and I were soon to be married. My mom suggested we all take a motorcycle trip one weekend. My dad and I ride together often, with her old coworker. We'll call him James. She explained he was going through a tough time with his ex-wife and needed to get away. We go and have a good time for a weekend, but it just felt weird. It was my mom, dad, and my now wife, and James. The dynamic and overall vibe of being around my mom's old friend was strange. He was a nice enough guy. He was tall, handsome, rich, and brawny. He had an ex-wife and 2 kids around my age, and he loved taking pictures of my mom and dad, which creeped me out. Anyways, nothing of importance happened on this trip, but my mom starts acting strange afterwards, and my dad and older sister are the ones who noticed it. At this time, I lived with my fiance on the other side of the city, but my older sister was living with my parents because she was in grad school and was recently divorced after 1 year of marriage, found out he was an addict and spent all their money. One night, a few weeks after our motorcycle trip, my fiance, sister, mom, and I went into an Incubus concert. My mom was acting weird, wanting to smoke pot, downing beers. This isn't like her at all, and just being weird in general. It was like she was a whole different person all of a sudden. After being there for 10 minutes, she said, "I'm gonna go grab a beer," and gets up and disappears for an hour. I went looking for her after she had been gone for 45 minutes, as I was concerned for her safety, and when I came back with no luck, I asked my sister if she's been able to get a hold of her. She rolls her eyes and goes, "I didn't bother calling, she's probably calling James." What the fuck? She then drops a bomb and then tells me she and dad suspect she's having an affair with him. She goes on to explain how sketchy she has been acting, doing things like changing her phone and iPad password, stepping out for phone calls and whispering, even putting a fucking jar of rocks on her phone while she slept so she would be woken up if anyone touched it. I'm assuming, I don't know. Fucking weird. My dad managed to look in her phone before she changed her password and quickly skimmed through her text with James and saw some suspicious cryptic dialogue. My mom finally gets back to us at the concert, and at this point I'm pissed and devastated all at once. I ask her what took so long. She didn't even have the beer she left to get, and she says, "Oh, I ran into some old friends from my old job at blank." Immediately sensing bullshit, what are the chances her 50-plus-year-old friends also went to see Incubus? So I ask who. She didn't expect this follow-up question, but slyly responds with, "You don't know them." I then ask, "Well, what are their names?" She's feeling the pressure and stutters before managing to make up some bullshit names. My wife and sister are listening to my interrogation very intently, while Brandon Boyd is killing it in the background singing "Pardon Me." I get sick of her BS and drop it. I am livid and crushed and thinking of my dad. My sister had already gotten to the point of disgust I was at, so she didn't say anything, and we all kind of ignored it until the next day. After this concert incident, my sister tells my dad what happened, and he finally approaches my mom about everything. He demanded to see her call history and sees a 45-minute call to James at the time of the concert, along with many others. He demands to know what the fuck is going on, and she says he is just going through a hard time with his ex, who is apparently debilitated from alcoholism, and she was just helping him get through it as a friend. Anyways, to keep any readers interested, I'm going to skip past this shit that could make this the longest read ever. Basically, the sketchiness goes on for months, and at the time of my wedding, my dad has a tracker in their goddamn car, has requested call logs from the phone company, and is looking at hiring a private investigator. I still remember dancing with her at my wedding. She looked at me adoringly, and I couldn't look back at her. Little did my dad or I know, me and my love for my kayaking would soon give him everything he needed. A month or so after my wedding, I go to stay with my old college roommate for a weekend of kayaking and fishing. He lived by my grandparents' lake house, my mom's parents, and I was going to pick up my kayak from their house that day. My dad randomly calls me just to say hi and probably tells me about whatever sketchy BS my mom has been up to, though probably not healthy. He is my best friend, and this has been our convos lately. I tell him that I'm headed to the lake house, and he responds with, "I doubt she would be this bold, but your mom said she was at the lake house with her girlfriends this weekend, and I want you to be prepared if that isn't the case. If it isn't, let me know." I knew what he meant. I didn't give my mom a heads up that I was coming on purpose, and as I drive by, I'm relieved to see just her car and another girly looking car in the driveway. I call my dad before going in and tell him my initial assessment is that nothing sketchy is going on from what I can see. Just looks like her and her friends are here. He's as relieved as I am. I walk up, knock on the door, and it's silent. The back patio door is unlocked, so I walk in. The first thing I see is a leather motorcycle jacket hanging on one of the bar stools and immediately recognize it as James. My heart starts pounding and my adrenaline is pumping as my vision gets all weird and my ears start burning. A million questions went through my head in a second, like, are they here? Do they know I'm here? Should I announce myself? God damn it, Mom, you fucking cheating asshole. I act fast, assuming they aren't there, but could be pulling up any minute. I take a picture of the jacket, I go to the garage, and sure enough, James's motorcycle is there. I take a picture of that and then run back in and see cell phones stacked where they are charging in the kitchen. I grab a phone I don't recognize. It didn't have a lock on it, so I immediately go to the pictures. First one is of two people I don't recognize, as well as my mom and James, and they're kissing each other on the lips. I scroll a little bit more, and more of the same shit. My heart is pumping out of my chest at this point, and I take a few quick pictures of my phones in the phone and run out of the house, not even remembering or caring what I had originally been there for. Something I should add here. When I was 7, my mom left my dad for a doctor who just wanted to use her and drop her like a bad habit. And my dad reluctantly took her back after she begged and pleaded. She blamed the doctor at the time, saying he drug/R-worded her some bullshit. My dad later told me that at the time, he told himself he was doing it for the kids and had planned on leaving her after we graduated high school. But they did so well in between then and our graduations that he eventually forgave her and was happy in their relationship. I remember them being separated, but I didn't know the details until recently. Okay, so anyways, I peel out of the driveway at the lake house and drive to a secluded street in the neighborhood as I try to figure out what the fuck to do. I let my heart rate slow a bit so I could think more clearly and then called my little sister, trying to decide if I tell my dad and if so, how. Up to this point, everyone just had their suspicions with no solid proof. My little sister, who is the sweetheart of the family, agrees that I needed to call dad and tell him immediately because he deserves to know, despite how bad it will hurt him. I then called my wife and she agreed, but we were both worried what he would do. I hesitate for a bit, but eventually I call my dad to tell him his wife of 25 years is cheating on him. When he answers, I just blurted out, "James is here. I have proof and mom is cheating on you." I didn't know how to put it delicately, so I just gave him the facts. He was in shock like me. He kept saying the same phrase over and over. "No fucking way, goddammit." Insert my mom's name. "God damn it. Wow, such a bitch. God damn it." After the initial shock wears off, he apologizes that I had to be the one to see it and then says he's on his way. It's a 3-hour drive and that he'll meet up with me at my roommate's. I immediately call my uncle, my dad's identical twin, and my other best friend, and tell him what's going on. I tell him I'm afraid my dad is going to do something stupid. He said he'll make sure he doesn't. They end up coming down together and meet me at my roommate's house. We talk for a couple hours and come up with a plan. They switch trucks with my roommate to go incognito because he must see it for himself. My dad promises he won't do anything stupid despite what he may see. He sneaks up there after dark, parks far away, and walks a mile through the woods with his brother and a pair of binoculars. He hides behind some trees when he got in a place and sees them on the patio with another couple drinking wine. They're cuddling and kissing like they're an old married couple, and like what they were doing is not beyond fucked up. It took every ounce of self-control for my dad not to run over there and go insane on them. Instead, he did the smart thing, thankfully, and just took pictures of them and left. The next morning, he cleared out their bank account, sent her the pictures he and I took along with a text that said, "I know everything. I'm leaving you." I can only imagine what their reaction was like. I rest assured that the rest of their little getaway was quite stressful. The next year was a nightmare for everyone, and my mom's reaction to this solidified my disdain for her. She dragged everyone into her bullshit and made our lives a living hell. My dad and I caught her red-handed. He just wanted her to go to James and let him live in peace. But instead, she dropped James and begged my dad to take her back. My dad agreed to pay her alimony if she granted him a divorce without lawyers that would have drained them both financially. She reluctantly agreed. After the divorce, my mom cried every day for a year. She moved in with my little sister in an apartment she couldn't afford. She got on antidepressants and went into a downward spiral that, because we loved her no matter what, took us all with her. All the lies she had told for a year began to surface more and more. Thinking back on that motorcycle trip where I spent a weekend with this prick made my stomach turn. I even bought the rich asshole a whiskey and coke. Though I despised who she was and what she had done, I was still very concerned for my mom and would listen to her sob on the phone and in front of me. She cried to my wife a lot, which I hated. This was my wife's first year in the family, and my mom was calling her bawling about how cruel my dad was being to her. My mom blamed my dad's twin brother for almost everything, saying he had stolen him away from her on all our guy hunting trips, and he was the reason their marriage fell apart. She was truly manic. My mom's parents and brother were disgusted with her because they loved my dad so much, and they refused to talk to her about it. So my wife, sisters, dad, and I were the ones who got the brunt of it. She tried manipulating everyone to make us think she was the victim here. It made me sick. She tried to make it seem like she was the battered wife and my dad had treated her badly. We all knew the truth, and I found myself despising her more and more as a person. My dad, on the other hand, went full-blown frat boy with his newly found freedom. He's a handsome guy with money, and though my mom's reaction was taking a toll on him in every way, he distracted himself by getting on Bumble and banging a bunch of 30 to 40-something-year-old women, hunted every weekend, and went on Harley rides during the week to escape it all. My mom still doesn't know about the women, and honestly, after being with the same woman for 30 years, being cheated on twice, and having every aspect of his life being controlled, he deserved it. He needed to get it out of his system. Anyways, getting us more towards the present. My wife and I became pregnant with our first child, and the joy of it was completely overshadowed by my mom's constant meltdowns. I couldn't even get them in the same room to tell all my family that they were going to have a new niece/granddaughter. For 10 months, she relentlessly berated my dad for not being able to forgive her and used my unborn child, their first grandchild, as a pawn to get him back. She told him that it would be his fault if their grandchild grew up with divorced grandparents. It made my blood boil. After a while, and against me and my sister's encouragement for my dad to stay strong, my dad caved and slowly started to get back with her. They sold their house and now live together in a townhome. My daughter is 17 months old now, and my parents have fallen back into the relationship of my mom dominating his life. Despite him trying to set strong ground rules this time, it's been like when a villain gets their power back after losing them. She went from weak and broken to manipulating everyone to her will like she has always done. My wife is shy, caring, and always worried to offend my family in any way, and my mom uses this to try and boss her around when it comes to our daughter until I step in. She'll constantly play the guilt card about how my wife's parents see our daughter more when they live 4 hours away. Yeah, you fucking psycho. They're good people. When I talk to my mom now, there's never love in my voice. I don't want to hate her, but her flaws are so apparent. She's a sociopath who has to be in control of everyone. We all love her despite this, but I am the only one who calls her out on her bullshit. My older sister barely speaks to her, my daughter is obsessed with her, and it makes me happy and furious at the same time. She doesn't deserve my dad, and she doesn't deserve our forgiveness, especially since this is twice now that we know about that she cheated on my dad. Not sure how to end this. Just wish my mom wasn't such a shitbag. I guess I'm thankful these events and my realization didn't happen sooner. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that there were good women out there, and instead I'd probably have a hard time trusting them. If you guys made it this far, thanks for reading. Edit. Just want to thank you guys. I read through most of the comments and messages that range from "this is fake" to "your mom is an asshole" to something sincere and relatable. I tried to write it in a way that wouldn't bore people to death. I know everyone says this, but I wrote this expecting no more than a handful of people to read it at most. Sorry it was so long. I did not expect it to be on the front page. Thanks for letting me vent and for responding with your own stories and thoughts on it. Felt good to get it off my chest. Y'all are awesome. We're rich, but nobody knows it. Sold our business this year, mid-50s. Net worth now over $10 million USD. Our kids have no idea. Teenagers, our siblings have no idea. Our parents are deceased. Nobody else knows except our banker. We live a low-income life, still shopping at Walmart and Target. At some point, we may buy a big look-at-me home on a lake or river, like 2 to 3 million, because why not? But for now, we're happy just being retired, not flaunting our wealth, and living a quiet life, driving an old Honda and Toyota. We are minimalists, by the way, and love decluttering our home of material goods. Good to just type this out for many internet strangers to see. Can't and won't tell anyone else. Cheers. To not flunk out of college, I changed my grades and thousands of others as well. When I was a student at a major university in the late 80s, I was failing several classes miserably. I had completely screwed up in 2 of my 6 classes, and I needed to make a plan of how not to flunk out. For one class, I decided to dedicate all my spare time in correcting where I went wrong and fix it by acing the final exam. The other class, which was much more technical, required that I come up with a plan. Keep in mind that I was a totally goody two-shoes kid who felt like they were in a desperate situation. Failing out of college was not something I could allow to happen. Desperate times, desperate measures. The class that I needed to pass was a science/engineering class that I had not bothered to go to. So I went to the very last Thursday class to figure out my plan. One thing the professor did say was that if you had a 93 or higher average in the class, you could opt out of the final exam that was happening in 1 week. I had a 64 average, so I had to take the exam. How was I going to ace this exam? My grades were too low to get pulled up enough. The only way to fix this was to get my grades changed. So I came up with a Hail Mary plan. One that involved a few rules to be broken, and by rules, I mean laws. The science building where the class was given would close for the weekend. This meant that the professor's offices were locked and most of the labs were locked as well. You could still get into the main parts of the building, but you had to talk to a security person if it was after hours. There wasn't digital badges and shit like that back then. So here was my plan. On Friday afternoon, after most classes were over, I scoped out the whole building. It was a U-shaped building that was 3 stories tall. I had to find a way in. Luckily, I found one of the first floor labs on the inside of the U. Had large horizontal windows that could be unlocked and would allow for someone to crawl through. Even better, one of the lab's windows were obscured by a small fenced-in area that housed some of the electrical and HVAC units. Large bushes lined the fence as well, so while I was there, I went into the lab and unlocked a window to allow myself a place to enter the building. The door of the lab was propped open, and I unpropped it and let it close. It locked. Good to know. It also reduced the chances of someone relocking the window. I also scoped out the professor's office. It was open, but he was not in there. It was very small and with no windows. Just enough room for a desk, his chair, and a couple of other chairs. His office door was all metal door, painted beige except for a small center window in the middle. The window had a wire screen built into the glass, held in place by a simple screwed-on frame. There were lots of manila envelopes and schedules, etc. on the door as well. This would be a challenge, but I had formed my plan. At around 3:30 in the morning, I arrived back at the building with my backpack and a plan to break into the building. I had a hammer, pliers, a roll of tape, and some screwdrivers that I had scrounged, and I was nervous as hell. I made my way through the bushes and climbed over the fence. I checked the window and it was still unlocked. I pulled myself up through the window and into the dark lab. Remembering that the lab doors would lock behind you, I slowly opened the lab door and placed some tape on the lock to stop it from locking. I was expecting a quiet building, but instead was greeted by the loud sound of machinery running. Another lab was conducting an all-night test or something, and at least 3 upper-level students were there overseeing the project. In a way, that was good because my presence wouldn't necessarily be noticeable by others. I would find out later that it would also cover any noises I made. I made my way to the professor's office door, which was a lot more out of the way part of the building. The office was located right by one of the stairwells, so I could hear anyone coming down the stairs, and also, if someone happened to start coming from the other way, I could use the stairs for a quick exit. I pulled out the screwdriver to start unscrewing the frame around the glass window in his door and soon realized that the screws were covered in decades of paint. Not good. What I thought was going to be a 2-minute job turned into a 45-minute job. I went into what I would call fuck it mode and just went to town on this window frame. I had a few starts and stops, but no one came by. I got the frame off and tried to pry the glass out of the frame. It was sealed with paint. Getting the glass out took a monumental amount of slow prying and steady effort. After 30 minutes of scraping and gentle pressure, I had the glass pane out. I slowly reached in and turned the lock to unlock the door. I grabbed a large manila folder on the outside of the door and repositioned it over the window, a perfect cover for the now mauled up window. I slid into the office and looked for something to cover the window that would block light. The desk calendar worked well, and a few pieces of tape held it up well. Then I turned the lights on to survey the scene. I was now presented with a desk, a chair, and small slim table behind the desk. Of all the ways my plan could go wrong, my biggest fear was that the professor may have taken all of his grades home with him. A quick look into the large flat file on his desk, and I had full handwritten grade register in my hands, and the pen he used for recording grades was tucked right inside. He taught 6 classes that semester, and I only needed to change 1 grade. My grade. However, now that I had seen how banged up the paint was on the glass window frame, I knew I had to alter the plan. I searched through the grade book and found all of my grades, and I saw I had several in the 70s and some lower 60s grades. I had done some work in the class. I thought it over for a few seconds and started executing Plan B. I went through every single class he had and began randomly changing anything in the 60s to read as if in the 80s. Then I went through to change all the 70s and found to read as 90s. I realized that the changed grades wouldn't stand up under close scrutiny, so I had to create a herd immunity of changed grades. I noticed a few bad students in some of the classes and made some extra efforts at changing their grades. A 0, now an 88. This was taking a while. With 6 classes and 50 students or so in each class and about 10 grades per student, there was about 3,000 grades in this register. I changed at least 1,500 of those grades. Of course, my grades were changed as well. Lots of numbers in the 90s. I closed the gradebook and placed it back in the drawer exactly as I had found it. But I heard a little plink sound. I pulled on the drawer and realized it was now locked, but wasn't before. Okay, so maybe he'll think he locked it. No big deal. My mind began to wonder of what the aftermath of this might be. Would this work? Would I be able to get away with not taking the exam by creating this academic chaos? About this time was when I noticed the IBM PC on his back table. Did he record his grades on a handwritten register and his PC? If he had a backup of the grades, all of this would be for nothing. Also, I couldn't reference all the changed grades as the drawer was now locked. I booted up his IBM PC XT and saw that it had 2 3.5 disk drives. There's 5 disks by the computer. What to do? I loaded each disk in the drive and type DEL and nuke them all. I hadn't planned on this, but then fuck it mode, so let's review the plan. Change so many grades that he would have to take an impossible amount of time to deconstruct the chaos and simply give out good grades or at least better grades as needed. No one particular student would be identifiable as a culprit because there were plenty who had a motivation to change the grades. This was as good of an idea as I could come up with. After having distributed all the good grades to all the good boys and girls, I gathered my tools and planned my exit strategy. The back of his door had a few items taped to it as well, so I replaced the glass and frame and covered it with another manila folder. I wrote a poorly written note on a post-it that said, "Sorry, mop handle cracked the glass. Replaced glass. Maintenance." I then split, got past the grade student running the machine, slipped out the window, and never went back. Didn't show up for the final exam, either because higher than a edited 90 or 93 average, and all. Waited 45 long days that summer to get my grades, got a 90 in the class. Yeah. Okay, no complaints. There had to be some other people who got their grades and were happier as well. Never suffered any consequence on this either, but it was the most stressful night of my life. I haven't done shit like this ever again. Okay, here's some follow-up to the messages and comments. So I'm 50 years old now, and I wrote this on a slow last hour of work on a Thursday because I've been reminded of it while reading a different Reddit post. I wrote the post in about 15 to 20 minutes. A few have asked about the grading discrepancy of 90 versus 93. Now that this memory has taken a little bit more of my brain space the last 24 hours, what I recall was that the requirement to not have to take the exam was having an 8 average. We were on a 7-point scale, then so that would have been 93 and up. I had changed my grades in the gradebook first to meet this requirement, again the whole time in adrenaline freakout mode, but once I had written over my numbers, it was obvious that I was the only one of the adjusted grades. I had hoped I could make the numbers look more convincing. I also realized the self-incriminating factor of just my grades being changed, and for self-preservation, started changing them all. It took forever. When I left the building and the sky was starting to get light for the sunrise, I stated that I arrived at 3:30 a.m. That was a guess. I wasn't concerned with what time it was, just wanted to get it in and get out as soon as I had resolved my grade problem. The thing I failed to convey in the post was that fact I didn't take the exam, but when I received my grades, I got a 90, which is a B on the 7-point scale. This didn't match up to not taking the exam because you should need an A to not take it. So technically, I should have complained and said, "Hey, where's my A?" since I did not take the exam. So I thought this might have been a dragnet where all students got a maximum B grade, and then this would allow them to find legit A students who would complain and possibly flush out an illegitimate C or D students who might ask about their better than expected grade. That's why I wrote no complaints. State of mind. Not an excuse in any way, but I had a parent pass away my first year at college. There wasn't a lot of counseling back then, just a hand on the shoulder and condolences. I don't remember even hearing the word depression uttered except in psychology class. Mental health was not freely discussed unless someone had big problems. I was probably on the cusp of what was then called a nervous breakdown. I had come from a small town and had expected to escape my one-horse town and breeze through college. One of the smart kids, but I had to let my only dream die. I had lost my dad, my academic career, my escape, and my identity at 19. I know plenty had it worse, but it felt really bad. I had to eat a lot of humble pie, and at first it sucked, but not long after, I felt free of the burden of being in the wrong place, pursuing the wrong thing, and I started smiling again. Aftermath. I changed schools that summer and also changed my field of study. Something about experiencing the absolute guilt of failure of the first school really made me driven at my new school. It was also a very much smaller school and had less distractions. I thrived, made straight A's, and loved learning the new subject matter. I'll describe my field as design, as that's nice and vague. I've been doing that since graduation successfully, and I have my own company and employees. I'm not world famous or anything, but I would bet most of you have an interaction with something I have designed. This school has been my favorite college sports team my whole childhood and was my single plan as a college student. I died because of this. I had not set foot on that large campus since that day I left many years ago, until this past summer when my son went to go tour. I had to hide the awful feeling I had as we walked by the building where this happened. Just this low sense of ancient dread from a past life staring at me as I walked by. My son unaware and instead excited to be there. The professor in this story works for the same university. He had done other things and came back. He's got patents and a PhD and is an expert in the field. Here's a potentially crummy part. He got his PhD within a year of this incident, so I really hope I didn't destroy any of his research when deleting the computer disks. I've thought about anonymously sending him this Reddit link or even star 67 calling him to see what the true aftermath was, but this seems like a bad idea and would likely just bum me out. Doubters. My post had several people who doubt the veracity of my post, and I get it. It is the internet. But the story is true, and if there's any untruth is in the specific number of details. Did I wait exactly 45 days for my grades that semester? Fuck if I know. I know I did count them back then because I was waiting for grades that would make or break me, but 40, 45, 65, I don't remember. Did I change that many grades? I swear, I changed as many as I could. 79, now 99. 66, now 86. That's what happened. I distinctly remember feeling the need to do more and more because every time I stopped, I would see one more I could change, and that meant I was safer from being discovered. There's another. Change it. And another. And more was better because each one was another step at covering my tracks. Response. This post got a lot of positive responses, good karma, etc. It's misplaced. I didn't do this out of a spirit of goodness. I gave others good grades to mask my fraudulent attempt at battering my academic standing. I went home after this and passed out sleeping for most of the day. I still had to study for the exam I was trying to ace legitimately, and then after that, for weeks afterward, I was always wondering, I wonder what happened, and waited on my grades to arrive. Several professors have expressed their disdain at this, and yeah, I can see why, obviously. It was a long time ago. I've pondered a way to make things right and correct this wrong I created, but I'm open to suggestions. Something about being 50 makes you want to correct mistakes that can be corrected. Bottom line. I'm glad if you thought this story from my youth was entertaining. I'm not proud of this. I've never told another soul this story. Who would? The lesson here might be, if it feels like work, dread, like you don't belong, be honest with yourself. There is likely a direction that you will thrive in, and this may not be it. I got one of my biggest screw-ups out of the way at age 19. Some people have theirs much later. I'm a happy person now. Life is good. It's all worth it. And alright guys, that wraps up disturbing Reddit confessions, and I enjoyed making this video. It was kind of an offshoot of my regular videos. It's similar in vibe, but let me know down in the comments below. Would you like to see more of these? Would you like to see more of these? Would you like my opinion on these? Would you like to see just any changes down below? Let me know. I appreciate all of you watching, especially all the way through the video. Thank you so much for watching, and this was Snook. Thank you for watching, and until next time, see ya.